Hey everybody, welcome on our channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Azula, Toph and June. Huge shout out to Namikaze09 for this story. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video too. So without wasting any more time, let's start the story. In the dimensional void Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the Nidaime Rikudo Sennin, second sage of the Six Paths, Roku Daime Hokage, Six Fire Shadow, and new Jinchuriki of the Jubi, was falling all around him was complete darkness with a light that was rapidly approaching him. Before the light engulfed his person and then he fell through an opening and now found himself free falling at terminal velocity toward the ground. The blonde cursed and knew if he hit the ground from his current height, he would die. With no other option he goes through a set of hand seals before stopping at a tiger seal and his cheeks bulge. He then spits out what looks like a torrent of lava that lands on the ground and spreads out before the mound turns white. As he makes contact, he bounces a few times on the soft substance and then slides down the slope of the jutsu he created before sighing in relief. Man, talk about a close call. The blonde sage muttered as he slowly got up. He takes in his surroundings and used his knowledge of the situation and what he knew of Jiken ninjutsu, space-time techniques, deducing that Toby had at the very least intended to trap him in a dimensional void that he created for eternity, but luckily it had also ripped a secondary tier to this place. Which was probably different from his own. So with that, Naruto realized that he is now permanently staying in this new world and that the now deceased Toby was probably laughing at him from the grave and it pissed him off that he allowed the bastard to pull that sneak attack. I hope that rots in the deepest pit of hell or the Shinigami's stomach for all eternity. You may have gotten the last laugh Toby, but with you gone, my world can start rebuilding itself and now have actual peace with you gone. He said before getting up and dusts his coat off. After this, he walked throughout the area and found a nearby settlement that seemed to be abandoned, judging from the torn down buildings. He then hops onto a wooden post and crouches down in a ninja-like fashion scouting his surrounding with keen eyes. He paused when the sound of fighting echoed through his ears and turned his head in the direction of where it occurred. He activates the Rinnegan and narrowed his eyes to get a closer look, noticing that someone was fighting inside the abandoned village. That person happened to be a beautiful girl around his age, dodging attacks from 6 different enemies who were from his surprise, shooting elements like fire, earth, water, and air at her, and one threw a projectile at her while she was defending herself with blue fire. He frowned at the one-sided battle because she was being backed into a corner from all sides and knew at this rate she wasn't going to last long, so he reaches into his pouch, pulling out a military ration pill and swallows it down, feeling the energy he lost when fighting Toby return to him. Now to even the odds. With that, Naruto leapt off the post and moved like a yellow blur across the landscape. Meanwhile, Azula, the princess of the Fire Nation, daughter of Fire Lord Ozai and Lady Ursa, and firebending prodigy, found herself cornered by Avatar Aang, the last airbender and his friends, as well as her older brother Zuko and Uncle Iroh, had her surrounded ready to unleash their bending attacks on her. Azula frowned as she witnessed how her target's foes had backed her into a corner and now she was trying to figure out a way on how to change the situation. She knew her lightning bending was out of the question due to the fact that it took too long to produce and that her uncle could redirect lightning if she made the attempt and critically injure if not kill her. Her only option was to either surrender until finding a means of escape or for her 2 friends Mai and Ty Lee to arrive and assist her. Just as she was pondering on what to do, a blur leapt from behind the broken wall and landed in between a surprised Azula and her offenders. The interloper seemed to be 5'11", 17 years old and wore what looked like a short-sleeved long white coat with red, blue, and golden flames licking the edges. On the back was the kanji Nidaime no Senku, second flash, and Nidaime Rikudo Sennin, second sage of the Six Paths. He also wore a dark green flak jacket with a long-sleeved black shirt underneath it, black cargo pants, and what appeared to be Anbu-styled boots with soles covering the feet. On his black shirt were 2 bands he wore on each sleeve and he also wore black fingerless gloves with metal plates on them and engraved in them were spirals. He had shoulder-length wild spiky golden blonde hair with jaw-length bangs framing both sides of his face and strapped to his back were 2 large scrolls. He slowly stood up while the wind blew through his hair and made his coat flutter like a cape while the others looked at the newcomer. Naruto looks up at the group with purple-grayish eyes that seemed to have 4 ripple-like rings and a pupil and then turns his head to Azula, who was now slightly frightened of her new position and his appearance until he gave her a nod of assurance, telling her he was on her side. He then turns his head towards the group and frowns at them. I may not know what's going on here, but 6 against 1 isn't a fair fight. He said. Iroh frowned at the newcomer's appearance and narrowed his eyes in a calculative fashion as he studied Naruto's form and could tell already that the teenage Kage was not one to take lightly. Our fight is not with you, young man, please step aside. He requested to Naruto, who smirks and shakes his head in a negative fashion. Sorry old man, but that's not gonna happen because now I plan on evening the odds. This had put everyone on edge for a few moments, but knew that they had to get past him if they wanted to defeat and capture Azula, so each person launched their strongest bending attack at the blonde, and Sokka threw the boomerang his father gave him. Naruto smirked as the elemental attacks and boomerang headed into his direction and held one hand out. Azula's eyes widened when she saw the attacks head towards her mysterious savior, wondering if he was crazy for taking on the four elements that would practically injure him critically or kill him until he spoke. "Relax beautiful, I got this," he said, and Azula felt her face heat up when he called her beautiful. As the attacks got closer, Naruto said only two words. "Shinra Tensei." When he said that, a powerful force repelled the attacks and sent each element back to the users. Aang got blown back by the air blast he shot, Katara stumbles back as she gets drenched in water, Toph was forced to dodge her earth attack, and Zuko and Iroh had to do the same lest they want to get badly injured by the flames. Sokka wasn't as fast as the others and was hit square in the stomach by his boomerang and sent flying, hitting the ground hard. Azula's eyes widened in disbelief when she saw him repel the elemental attacks by saying a few strange words she never heard of and sent them back to the benders. Seeing their stance break, Naruto took this opportunity to move in a burst of speed and attack the closest target, who happened to be Zuko. When the banished prince tried to get his bearings back, he felt the wind get knocked out of him due to Naruto striking him with a powerful palm strike to the chest, knocking him backwards, off his feet and crashing onto the ground, tumbling and skidding back, leaving a narrow skid mark. This move surprised Iroh due to the unnatural speed and strength their quarry displayed. Toph stomps the ground, causing a cube-shaped rock to shoot from the ground and punches it, sending the projectile at her target. Naruto spun around with his fist beat back and swings it forward, smashing the flying rock with his fist and reducing it into dust and pebbles, shocking the blind earthbender when she felt the raw strength behind the move through the vibrations in the ground. Naruto then swung his left hand sideways, sending several shuriken at her, and she reacts by raising both of her arms up, having a wall of earth rise in front of her, and the shuriken were embedded into it. He was about to attack again, but then his senses went on full alert and somersaults into the air, evading a stream of air that was fired by Aang, and summons wind chakra into his right arm. KSHM, Beast Wave Palm. Naruto swings his arm in a diagonal slash, releasing a slicing chakra wind wave that descends towards the airbender. Aang's eyes widened in shock and disbelief as he saw their new opponent airbend, but snaps out of his state and flips backwards as the air blade hits the ground, leaving a cleanly cut trench in the ground. Naruto takes this opportunity and inhales some air into his lungs. Futon Tapa, wind release great breakthrough. He aims his move at Aang and unleashes a gust of wind upon the young monk. Aang shouts out in surprise as he was blown backwards by the powerful gust of wind which knocked him over an abandoned building and sent him crashing down hard. Iroh witnessed the encounter with wide eyes as he has never before seen someone not only move with such speed and precision, but also repel elemental bending moves with an unknown force or even airbend, as he thought all the air nomads minus Aang were dead. His facial expression shifted to a sharp and focused one, and then got into a stance with his arms stretched outwards from opposite sides and moves in a circular motion. Once Naruto landed back on the ground, the sound of electricity cackling got his attention and he turned around, only to get wide-eyed as he saw Iroh generate lightning in a circular fashion and in a form he's never seen before. Not willing to take a risk, Naruto took the safe route and did a quick series of hand seals before aiming his right arm down and clutching it with his right hand around his wrist. Lightning chakra engulfs his left hand and cackles to life, making a sound that sounded like birds chirping. Chidori, 1000 birds. Azula's eyes widened in awe and amazement as she saw lightning cackle around the stranger's arm and then dashes towards Iroh with his technique chirping to life and it trailed around his left hand. Iroh then shot his right hand forward, releasing a bolt of lightning at his foe, with Naruto swinging his lightning-coated arm at the descending blast. When the two attacks collided, a flash of light occurs, forcing Katara, Azula and Toph to cover their faces with their arms. Naruto skids back a little as the force from the blast counteracts his speed, but he holds his ground as the attack splits in two and bypasses him in the air. Zuko slowly got back up after shaking the cobwebs out of his head, and when he regains his vision, his eyes widened as he saw his uncle's strongest attack get cut in two by the blonde sage, and the same went with Aang, who was gobsmacked. When the attack died down, Iroh was beyond surprised as he saw Naruto with his arm stretched outwards with lightning cackling around his left hand and didn't seem to have any form of injury in his person, aside from the static that shot around parts of his body. A smirk formed on Naruto's face as his technique remained active and then slams it onto the ground. Chidori Nagashi, 1000 birds current. He releases an electronic discharge upon the ground and towards Iroh. Said man felt pain erupt all around his body and he cried out in pain as he got electrocuted. No. Zuko shouted out, and with an enraged yell, he rears his arms back and throws them forward, releasing a powerful stream of fire at Naruto. The sage sees this from the corner of his eyes and does a ram seal. Suiton. Mizitum, water release. Water gun. Naruto spews a large yet powerful jet stream of water at the fire blast, resulting the flames dissipating instantly, forming a small steam fog. Zuko cancels his attack as he saw the fast projectile head right him and rolls to the left side as it hits the ground. The water technique was so strong that it tore through the earth, much to the scarred teenager's shock. When Naruto manages to force them back, he flips backwards and lands beside Azula, who just stared at him in awe at the skills he displayed. Naruto performs a few hand seals and slammed his hand on the ground. Kuchius no Jutsu, summoning jutsu. He called out and a puff of smoke appeared. When it cleared, an elephant-sized Chinese dragon with red scales, black long single whiskers, a black underbelly, large bat-like wings, ivory spikes that started at its neck and ended to its tail, along with 4 limbs that had long curved white claws, and it had a pair of yellow-red colored eyes with slit pupils, appeared before its summoner, snorting out puffs of smoke from its nostrils. The dragon looked at Naruto and bowed its head. "You summoned me, Naruto-sama?" it asked in a deep voice. Sokka groaned and sat up, rubbing his stomach, while the others looked at the dragon the newcomer has summoned. He blinks in confusion and saw them look at the creature and gawks when he sees the beast. Azula looked like she was gonna faint from shock because standing a few feet away from her was an actual live dragon that was talking before hearing Naruto speak up. "Just 1 second," he says and performs a series of hand seals. Heian. Goryuken no Jutsu, fire release great dragon fire technique. He fires a large fireball that morphed into a roaring dragon head and ascended towards the horrified group, but instead of hitting them, it hits the ground and causes an explosion that sent them flying backwards. Naruto motions for the dragon to lower its head, which it did, and sits behind its hair. He then looks at Azula and holds his hand out. "Come on, take my hand," he offers to the Fire Nation princess. Azula was at first skeptic at the offered hand, but realized that this person did save her life when he could have killed her and the others if he wanted to. She takes his hand and is pulled onto the dragon's back and sits behind him. "Hold on tight. This guy can fly pretty fast," he says as the dragon raised its head and spread its wings. As Azula wrapped her arms around his waist and held on as tight as she could, the dragon roared and instantly took off into the sky, causing Azula aches and increased her grip on his waist as the wind blew in her face. Back with the gong. Aang and his companions groaned and slowly sat up and looked at the large burning crater, and they looked around to see Azula along with that blonde interloper had left. He then saw Zuko with his uncle, who seemed to be injured with burns from his right arm, as well as his left leg from the fire blast. Katara ran over to the two and saw the wounds Iroh had and was about to pull out her pouch and help him. "Stay away from us," Zuko yelled as he got in front of Iroh with his fighting stance. "You guys have done enough for one day." "Zuko, please, I can help treat your uncle's wounds." Katara tried to offer only to back away when an angry Zuko swipes his arm sideways, unleashing a wave of flames as a warning. "Leave," he roared in anger, surprising the group, and reluctantly, Aang and his friends left Zuko and Iroh and got back on Appa, flying away from the 2 fugitive firebenders. As they took off on continuing their journey, their minds were filled with many questions on their flight, with the main focus on the mysterious stranger who helped Azula. Sokka, however, let out a frustrating yell and messed up his hair. "I just don't get it. How did that guy block all our attacks without even doing anything? And how did he make that dragon appear out of thin air?" he yelled. "Who knows, Sokka, but it would be best if we avoided him from the moment," Katara stated as she looked over her brother's wounds, while Aang sat there confused. "What surprises me is the fact that he can fire bend as well as water bend, air bend, and somehow bend lightning. How is that even possible?" She wondered while Aang pondered on this as well and realized something. Earlier when he repelled our attacks, it was not a form air bending. If it was, then I would have sensed the shifts in the air currents, but there was none at all. He released some type of force that was able to repel not just our elements but weapons as well, and it's nothing that even I have heard of," Aang answered as his friends looked at him in shock and disbelief. "So if it was not airbending, then what was it, Twinkle Toes?" Toph asked as she faced the young monk. "Even your airbending would have trouble against my earthbending, since they're both opposing elements." "I know that, Toph, but I am very positive that what that guy did was not airbending. It was some form of invisible force that's even more powerful than my airbending," Aang said to his friends again as they were both scared and confused at what he just said. But afterwards he was able to bend the air in a way that was practically above the level of a master, but from the way he was able to cut through the earth, his form is completely different. "I think we should avoid that guy at all costs until I can speak to Avatar Roku again," he warned, because if their new foe was capable of using the elements like he could, then who knows what else he could do. I agree, until we can get an idea on who this guy is, we should avoid him at all costs, because it is a possibility that he could be stronger than Aang. Katara stated, and everyone nodded their heads in agreement. Meanwhile, Naruto and Azula were riding across the sky on the dragon he summoned, and the princess of the Fire Nation couldn't believe that she was riding on a living breathing dragon. She thought they were all extinct since the last dragon was killed off by her uncle. It was amazing yet terrifying, but she wouldn't show it as she was secretly enjoying the ride. Azula then saw her tank and tapped Naruto on the shoulder. Said blonde looked at her, and she pointed down to her entourage, so Naruto looked down, seeing the machine, and nodded. Hey Sauryu, head to that tank that's below us. He informs the dragon, who nods and dives down to the metal machine. Azula wasn't prepared for the drop and held onto Naruto as tight as she could, with her face heating up from the lean muscle she felt. Sauryu flared his wings and landed slowly near Azula's transport. Naruto then hopped off and helped Azula onto the ground as well. Thanks for the lift, buddy. He thanked the dragon nods. You're welcome, Naruto, feel free to summon me anytime you require assistance. Sauryu informed his summoner before returning back to the summoning realm in a puff of smoke. Afterwards, the young sage took this opportunity to check out his surroundings and admired the sight of the forest. Man, these forests are vast, they reminds me of the ones around my home village. He mutters to himself until he felt a hand touch his shoulder. He turns his head and glances at Azula, who was staring at him in an oddly fashion because she carried a look of curiosity as well as a form of keen interest within her gold-colored eyes. Naruto turned around and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Oh sorry, I just admiring the scenery since it reminded me of my old home. He apologized. So are you okay? Those guys pretty much gave you a run for your money out there. Azula blinked a few times but nods at the stranger's concern for her health even if they just met. I'm fine thank you, though I must admit the moves you displayed out there were very impressive, especially when you split that lightning attack in half. She praised, even though she was a little jealous, she was still amazed at what he did. Never in her life has she seen a display of fire bending, water bending, air bending or lightning bending, and from the way he carried himself, he was a seasoned fighter that was capable of handling himself against more than one opponent and keeping his cool, despite being a few years older than her, and doubted if her father or uncle could face him in a one-on-one fight. Naruto on the other hand rubs the back of his head sheepishly. Thanks, but to be honest I wasn't showing my full strength in that fight since I haven't fully recovered from my travel to that abandoned village. He answered back because while he was recovering his strength, he actually had to try with that lightning strike Iroh unleashed on him since the move was extremely deadly and would have done more than just zap him had it hit him directly. I'll take your word for it, but may I know your name, warrior? Azula asks the blonde and got a positive nod. I'm Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, or for short call me Naruto, at your service my lady. Naruto introduced with a bow and took her hand into his and kissed her knuckle in a gentlemanlike manner, causing a tint of pink to appear on her face as he let her hand go. And may I know your name of the strong yet beautiful lady standing before me? He teased with a charming smirk on his face. Azula felt her face heat up more since no boy her age would try to approach her, not just due to her royal status as the daughter of the Fire Lord, but because she was trained more in the aspects of war than learning how to socialize with others, especially when it came to boys, much like her brother Zuko was. I'm Azula, daughter of Fire Lord Ozai and crowned princess of the Fire Nation. She said, which caused Naruto's eyes to widen and let out a low whistle. Whoa, I just rescued a princess. First Koyuki-chan, Haruna-chan, Toki-chan, and lastly Xian-chan. Well, she was more of a priestess than a member of royalty in Demon Country, but whatever. I think Kami gets his or her kicks out of messing with me for some reason when it comes to women of royal status. Wow, what are the odds of me saving a princess? Again, those guys must be crazy to try and capture someone of royalty. Naruto stated. Azula on the other hand lets out a small chuckle and folds her arms over her chest. Yes, I am of high royal status within my country, but I'm not weak in any way, shape, or form like those other pampered girls who come from wealthy families. I was trained in the art of war and combat at a young age after all. She stated as she was in no way, shape, or form a weakling. Naruto nodded in agreement. Yeah, I could tell when you took on that guy with the scar on the left side of his face and the bald monk kid with the arrow tattoo on his head. He said, which got her attention. Wait, you saw me fight the Avatar and my brother? Why didn't you help me then? She asked, giving him an accusing look which made him blink. Well, the thought did come to me, but from my point of view, you were doing a fine job in handling both of them, so I figured you had them beat until the rest showed up. You were amazing out there, especially when you used blue fire. You're very skilled, Azula Harem. He said, and she smiled a little at his praise until he said Harem. What does Harem mean? She asks. Where I come from, Harem means princess, so I'm complimenting you using my people's form of language. He answered before sensing two others that were being watching them close by. Not knowing if they were friend or foe, Naruto vanished and suddenly appeared with Mai and Ty Lee with a hand on their shoulder. Mai had black hair that was tied in 2 braids going down her back and wore a dark red outfit. Ty Lee had brown hair tied in a single braided ponytail and brownish gray eyes. She wore a light reddish pink 2-piece outfit that showed her midriff. The 2 girls blinked in surprise, shock and confusion, wondering how he knew where they were hiding and managed to move them from their previous spot unnoticed, and Azula wondered the same thing, schooling a stunned expression. "How did you never mind?" "Mai, Ty Lee, this is Naruto who helped me earlier when the Avatar and his group cornered me. These 2 are the team who are helping me track down and capture the Avatar. Mai specializes in using throwing weapons like knives and darts, and Ty Lee here is skilled in acrobatics, hand-to-hand combat, and uses a technique that is capable of blocking a bender's Kai, which prevents them from using their bending powers for a limited time," she explained. Before Naruto could greet them, Ty Lee landed in front of him with her face a few inches close to his and stared into his eyes, which made him nervous due to the fact that she was in his personal space. "Whoa. Your eyes look strange, and your hair it resembles the sun," the petite girl said with a wide grin on her face, while Naruto's sweat dropped. "Is this your natural hair color?" Ty Lee wondered as she grabbed one of his bangs and rubbed it between her fingers. "Oh, and it's so soft." She mused until Mai sighs and pulls her back by the back of her collar. "Sorry about Ty Lee, she's the oddball of the group," she said in a bored tone while patting the pouting girl on the head. Naruto shrugs and brushes his hair back with his hand. "It's fine, and to answer your question, Ty Lee, yes, this is my natural hair color, and as for my eyes, you could say that these are a trait I inherited from an ancestor in my family bloodline that shows up in only a few generations," he says and deactivates his Rinnegan, replacing them were a pair of cerulean eyes that had slit pupils. The 3 girls' eyes widened when he did that and their jaws dropped. That was when Ty Lee was in his face again and an ooh sound escaped from her lips. "Now your eyes are pretty like the ocean. How did you do that trick with your eyes?" she asks and is once again pulled away from him by Mai, who apologizes again but is also curious in how he did that. "I'll explain later, but first, if I may, Azula, why is it that you're after that bald kid and his friends as well as who the chubby old man is? Is he your grandpa something?" he asks, causing a smile to form around her mouth, and she laughed lightly. "He's not my grandfather, the chubby old man is my uncle Iroh, and the one with the scar burn was my older brother Zuko, who has a tendency to be happy about nothing. The bald kid is the last of a group of airbenders who are known as air nomads and is currently the Avatar. The only thing I cannot understand is how I am not able to capture them, as I thought if I had made my own special team, I would have less trouble in capturing one or the other," the fuming princess wondered. Naruto blinked a few times when he heard the name Avatar. "Capture the Avatar?" Naruto repeated to Azula, who raised a brow while Mai and Ty Lee blink a few times. "He's the bald-headed kid with a blue arrow on his head, he is the Avatar," she answered, only to confuse Naruto more as he rubbed the back of his head in wonder. Who's the Avatar?" Naruto asks. His question made the 3 of them look at him in shock and disbelief when he asked who the Avatar was. Said blonde blinks a few times and scratched his cheek. "What? Did I say something wrong?" Azula managed to snap out of her stupor and narrow her eyes. "You don't know who the Avatar is? Everyone knows who he is. He's a master of the 4 elements: water, earth, fire and air," she explains. After hearing that, Naruto scoffed and folded his arms, not looking interested at all in what he heard. "So he can bend 4 elements, big deal," he said nonchalantly, which almost made her fall over, as well as Mai to look at him owlishly, and Ty Lee's jaw dropped. "That's all you can say is so what? What's wrong with you?" she practically yelled, and he shrugged nonchalantly. "Nothing's wrong with me because, like I said, big deal if the kid can use 4 elements. I'm a master in using 5 elements. So you expect us to believe that you can take on the Avatar? Wait, you said you're a master in 5 elements. There are only 4 elements which make up the 4 nations, and only a single person can only master one," she corrected. Naruto smirked and shook his head in a negative fashion. "Not where I came from, as there are more than 4 elements. My powers are beyond that of the benders, and there are more than 4 elements. There are actually 23, and it has taken me years to master them all. I also have powers that many would kill for but will never be able to achieve. For example, the 5 elements I've mastered are fire, water, earth, lightning, and wind, with some of the secondary and rare elements being light, darkness, gravity, yin, and yang. There are also some of the sub-elements, which are wood, ice, storm, lava, metal, sand, blaze, crystal, dust, and scorch," he answered. Azula was silent for a while and looks into his eyes for any form of deceit, only to see none, since she was skilled in the ways of using deceit due to her training. "Really? Then prove it. Show us your power." She folded her arms over her chest as she issued her challenge. Hearing this, Naruto chuckles and nods. "Very well then, but I won't be showing all of my powers, as I don't know you well enough to part with all of my secrets. Azula nodded her head in agreement and watched him walk a couple of feet away from the trio and stand in the middle of a field. Naruto inhales some air into his lungs and pauses for a few seconds. Kaiten. Demonji, fire release. Fire blast. He unleashes a powerful white fire blast that shoots through the forest, incinerating any trees that was in its path and reduced them to ashes. The girls watched in awe and amazement as they saw the flames burn a path into the forest. Naruto stops the fire jutsu and then claps his hand together. Suiton. Sushma, water shockwave, he calls out, and the girls watched as a vortex of water swirled around him from the thin air and then became a massive wave that washed over the remaining flames and drenched most of the forest. Oten. Doryu Taiga, earth flow river. A large wave of mud flows through the ground and spreads throughout the path and then softens up the ground that was drenched in water. Naruto holds his right arm out and then points his index and middle finger towards a tree. Blue sparks of electricity cackle and dance around his fingers until a blue orb appears in the tips of his two fingers. Rain. Byakurai, lightning release. Pale lightning. Naruto fires a thin light blue beam of electricity towards the tree and when it struck, it left a gaping hole in the tree. Afterwards Naruto inhales another breath of air and his chest expands even more. Gyuden. Mugen de Toppa, infinite great breakthrough. Naruto exhales a gust of wind so powerful that it rips the trees off the ground and sends them flying. The girls were wide-eyed and their jaws just hung open when they saw him use 5 elements. Naruto stopped and couldn't help but smirk at their reaction. So what do you girls think? Pretty cool, huh? Naruto was met with silence as his answer from the three as they just looked at him with nothing except awe. But after a few minutes passed, Azula came out of her shock from what she had witnessed from the blonde and spoke up. You said you mastered all the elements, but you only have done 5 from what you had said would be too much to ask for the 6th one. Naruto grinned and popped his knuckles. Sure thing. Now to restore a part of the forest I destroyed. Naruto got down on one knee and places his hands in a form that looked like he was praying. Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee watch as Naruto stayed in that position until they witnessed several small trees sprout from the clear path Naruto made. Mokuton Hijutsu. Jukai Kantan, wood release secret technique. He said, and suddenly a large amount of trees sprouted and covered up the path Naruto cleared earlier and also re-grew the trees that were blown away by his wind jutsu. After doing that, Naruto placed his hands on the ground. Mokuton. Shichibuken no Jutsu. That was when a 2-story wooden house shot up from the ground and… So what do you think? Naruto asked as he was now sitting on the roof of the said house. The girls were silent for and Azula spoke up. Amazing. This is so unreal. You really are a master in the elements. She said as Naruto leaps off the roof and grins. Told ya. He said. Mai looks at the trees he restored and at the wooden house and for the first time, a true smile formed on her lips. I can already tell that things won't be boring with you around, Naruto. Ty Lee on the other hand was jumping for joy and was hoping to stay in a house than sleep in the transport tonight. That was amazing, Naruto. Azula, can we rest in the house for tonight, can we please? Ty Lee begs and gave the fire princess the puppy eyes. Azula's eye twitched from the size of her friend's eyes and sighs. Yes, Ty Lee, we can stay in the house for tonight only. We have to stay on the Avatar's trail. She says while the energetic girls squealed in joy and the glumps Azula. Naruto's sweat dropped when he saw this and leans next to Mai. Is she always this bubbly? He asks the silent girl who nods and sighs. Sadly yes, we don't know where she gets the energy. She answered and Naruto's sweat drop grew when he saw the girl rub her cheek against Azula's and said princess's brow was twitching dangerously as well as blowing puffs of blue fire out of her nostrils. Remind me to never ever give her any sweets, otherwise Azula would kill her and me. Naruto says, which makes Mai cover her mouth and giggle and then goes to pry the acrobat off of Azula before said girl fried her with a bolt of lightning. Afterwards Ty Lee, Mai and Azula got a few of their things and went into the house. When Azula walked past Naruto who was leaning against a tree with his arms folded, she stops and looks at the blonde who opens both of his eyes, smiles, and winks at her. This action makes her blush and walk into the house faster while Naruto chuckles to himself. I still got it. He says while Azula had other thoughts on her mind about Naruto. What's wrong with me? Why am I acting like this over him? I just met the guy, for crying out loud, even if he is strong, a powerful warrior and good looking. Come on Azula, get it together. Your priority is to capture the Avatar and those traitors first. She though as she made it to a fully stocked room that had a soft bed and everything. She set her stuff down and removes the golden crown headpiece that held her hair in and lets her waist-length hair fall down. Besides, I doubt that he'd be interested in me anyway. Most guys in the Fire Nation aren't due to my reputation. She said to herself with a hint of sadness and pulls a comb out of her bag and brushes her hair back in slow strokes. Unknown to her, Naruto was sitting on top of the roof, watching Azula using the Tmege no Jutsu telescope technique with a crystal ball sitting on his lap and noticed the look in her eyes that reminded him of Gaara's when they first met, but then was able to help change his way of proving his existence. I may not know you Azula Harem, but I will do everything I can to help you once I figured out what goes on in this world. He says to himself before performing the tiger, dog, and snake seal. Taju Mokuten Bunshin no Jutsu, multiple wood clone technique. On top of the roof, several wood clones materialized around Naruto and become perfect replicas of him. I need you all to travel around the area and track this so-called avatar and his group along with Azula's brother and uncle, but do not engage them. He instructed. The clones nodded and each leapt off in a blur in different directions, leaving Naruto by himself. A few hours later. It was easy for the wood clones to track down their targets due to their ability to merge with the plant life around them and spy on them, with the group noticing, especially since the blind earthbender had the ability to sense irregular vibrations through the earth, and the same occurred when one of them managed to find Iroh and Zuko, with said old man currently recovering from the injuries the real Naruto inflicted on him. After watching the group, one of the clones casts the Gain Jutsu Nihin Shimja no Jutsu, Temple of Nirvana around the Avatar's group, along with Iroh and Zuko, who were in an abandoned shack up in a mountain terrain. Once they fell into a tranquil sleep, each of the clones approached one of the individuals and used the mind-reading technique, which he also learned from Inoichi from the intelligence division. It allowed him to enter a target's subconscious and extract any information needed, even if the target has forgotten it by placing his hand on the victim's forehead. What he had learned about the situation and the world in general was interesting, with the major part being the Avatar, who is the spirit of the planet incarnated in human form and thus the only physical being with the ability to learn all four bending disciplines: water, earth, fire and air, and his or her duty was to keep the nations in balance using his powers. Along with the reincarnation cycle, which represented the four seasons: spring, summer, fall and winter, along with their respective elements, since whenever the Avatar passed on, another would be reborn into another nation. From what he learned, On was the last of a group of monks who were known as air nomads due to the instigator of the war, Fire Lord Sazin, causing a mass genocide amongst the airbenders, since the Avatar would be reborn in the Air Nation after the death of the previous one and spent the last 100 years or so encased in a large mass of ice before being discovered by the Water Tribe's siblings. From Katara and Sokka, he discovered that they lost their mother in a Fire Nation raid years ago, and their father left to aid in the war against the Fire Nation until they found Aang and started their journey to save the world. From Toph Beifrong, he learned that she was from a noble and wealthy family in the Earth Kingdom, but kept her hidden from the world due to her blindness and proclaimed her to be weak and unsuitable. After running away, she learned a different version of earthbending from the badger moles, who like her were blonde but were able to earthbend in a way that allowed them to see the environment in their own way and move around freely. Toph also used this ability to sneak out of the estate of her parents and join an underground earthbending fight tournament where she became known as the Blind Bandit. But Zuko and Iroh was the firstborn of late Fire Lord Azulon and Fire Lady Illa, older brother of Ozai and retired general of the Fire Nation military force, and gained the title Dragon of the West due to slaying the last dragon in his youth. He had a son named Lu Ten, who died during the failed siege of Ba Sing Se and was also the first heir to the throne. Zuko was the son of Fire Lord Ozai and Princess Ursa and Azula's older brother, and was also the banished prince due to Ozai exiling him from his home and wouldn't allow him to return until he captured the Avatar. Once the clones dispersed and Naruto gained this info, he was indifferent about the whole ordeal. The first being the Avatar, who people seemed to praise like a god in human form for his abilities in bending the four elements and keeping balance amongst the world, which didn't sit well with him, and for a good reason. The first was being that the current Avatar was a chronologically 113-year-old boy with little to no idea on how the real world operates and believes that since he was the Avatar, people would be expected to listen to his wisdom, which would give the teenager an ego. This reminded him of how his relative Nagato Uzumaki or his alias Pain acted, believing that he was a god and everything he did was for the sake of everlasting peace, since the shinobi world was a cycle of hatred, greed, and destruction. Naruto learned firsthand that everlasting peace was nothing more than an illusion that would never happen as long as humans existed, but there were short periods of peace, which was more of a sign of neutrality amongst enemies, until they grew strong enough to start another war. Naruto theorized that if this boy believed that he could bring permanent peace and failed to do so, then the backlash would be catastrophic and would turn out just like Nagato and Obito, only on a higher scale, since he is more in tune with his emotions and doesn't know how to suppress certain ones. This didn't sit well with him, but he couldn't just outright kill the kid, since the Avatar would be reborn into a different nation and it would take years to find the boy-girl, so he settled with trying to find a way to remove the influence of the Avatar from the world so that the blonde sage sighs in annoyance and rubs the back of his head. Shikamaru always said that I was troublesome and getting into things I should stay out of, but if I did I wouldn't be me. He chuckles as he sits up and dusts his pants, realizing that it was nightfall. Before heading to his lodging he quietly enters Azula's room, noticing the princess was sleeping in a peaceful manner. He crouched down next to her and places the tip of his index and middle fingers on the girl's forehead and closed his eyes in concentration as he entered her memories. When he searched through them, he saw her parents, uncle, cousin, and brother. From one of the distant memories, she noticed that years back, she and Zuko were close as siblings, playing and laughing together with their mother and father watching. But then a few years later the happy family started to slowly drift, mainly due to Ozai's jealousy towards his older brother and his accomplishments in the military, and the favor Iroh gained from their father only made him resent the man more, which ended with him being more infatuated with power and willing to do anything he could to get it, even if it meant sacrificing his family to do so. From Azula's memories, he witnessed the man trying to convince his father to pass Iroh's claim to the throne to him in order to keep the royal bloodline from passing due to the death of Iroh's only son. Apparently Azulon was furious with what his second son suggested and decided to punish by having the man kill his firstborn to see the pain Iroh had to go through. Naruto frowned when he saw Ozai was gonna go through with taking Zuko's life, since the young prince was in his eyes a disgrace and embarrassment, and it was only through the pleas of his wife that he spared his son and knew her husband wanted the throne badly and devised a plan that resulted in the death of the old Fire Lord and banishment of Ursa. Naruto couldn't help but admire Ursa's sacrifice to save her son and decided to look into some older memories. He got around to some of a younger Azula and her father, who found out that she was a firebending prodigy and started to take her under his wing, much to his wife's disapproval, and had her go through vigorous training regimens, ranging from her studies to being taught by the best. He pretty much trained her to be a perfectionist where failure was not an option, and showing mercy or any form of compassion for the weak was irrelevant. The young sage was angered at how he pushed his daughter physically and mentally, and even had her harm others in order to make her prove her worth to him, and if she didn't meet his expectations, he threatened to never love her and consider her dead weight like her failure of a brother, and he even went so far as to a hypnotic technique he learned to make her a mirror image of himself. But that Naruto cut off the technique in order to prevent himself from releasing murderous intent around the house and calm himself down for a few seconds. He gazed back at Azula's peaceful form and couldn't help but pity her. She was forced to become something at such a young age without any say in it all because that fool wanted to create a true heir like he was. He made a mental vow that if he ever got Ozai in his line of sight, he'd make the man wish he was never born. After pondering for a bit he decided to do something that would possibly undo some of the damage Ozai did to her mentality, even though it won't be much it was better than nothing, because if Azula ever broke down mentally, she'd never recover from the stress and would slowly kill her. He performed a few hand seals and places his hands over her head and they glowed white. Azula's expression went from tense to relaxed as he carefully removed his hands. He leans forward and gives her a gentle kiss on the forehead before pulling away and smiles when she sighs in content and smiles warmly. "Sweet dreams, Harem," he whispered and vanished into the shadows. The next morning, Naruto was sitting on top of the roof watching the sunrise up in the mountains, pondering what he had learned last night about this world. He knew the chances of him returning to his old world would pretty much be impossible since he didn't have any time-space techniques that could send him back, but the main reason he didn't want to go back is because with him being the vessel of the reformed Jubi, every ninja and Kage would be after him not just for the Biju's power, but the abilities of his bloodline the Rinnegan. Knowing this did hurt, but he realized it was better this way. "Hey Naruto?" a feminine voice said behind the blonde. Naruto turned his head and saw Azula standing behind him with her hair down and tied in a low ponytail. Naruto smirked when he saw her and noticed the nervousness in her eyes. "You know Azula, you look a lot cuter with your hair down like that. It brings out your inner beauty," he said in a teasing tone which made Azula blush and strokes one of her bangs back from the compliment, but then pauses and glares at him. "You're teasing me, aren't you?" she questioned and Naruto smiled. "Maybe I am, maybe I'm not," he said, which made her huff up. She decided to sit next to him and stare at the rising sun with him, remaining silent for a few minutes before speaking up. "You know Naruto, I can't help but say that you have an odd hair color." Ty Lee was right when she said your hair resembled the sun. "Maybe you should wear something to cover it up," she advised humorously. Naruto brushed his hair back and snorts at the thought of hiding his hairdo from sight. "There's no way I'm covering my hair and I'm definitely not shaving it. It took me forever to get my hair the way I wanted," he replied. "It gains a lot of attention, especially from the ladies who say it gives me a rugged yet handsome appearance." She laughs lightly and shakes her head in amusement, but inwardly agreed because it did in her thoughts made him attractive. "You are a very odd person, Naruto," she states. "All that aside, I was wondering if you would like to help me and my team pursue the Avatar. I mean from the fight I witnessed the other day, he was no match for you, and it would be interesting to have you help me, I mean my team. She corrected, asked while he thinks about it. Sure, why not? I got nothing better to do, so I'll help. But I need to know why your nation is afraid of a 13-year-old kid. I mean, you practically backed him into a corner before his friends arrived. He asked since he needed to know more about this avatar, despite gaining knowledge on the incarnation of the planet via his clones, but wanted to hear it from a source who knew more about the workings of this being. Azula nods and starts to explain. As you already know, the avatar can bend 4 elements, but there's a reason why. The avatar represents the cycle of nature, and whenever the past avatar from a nation dies, a new one is reborn so that the balance of the nations is kept in check. For example, the last avatar that lived during the reign of my great-grandfather Sazin was a firebender named Roku. After he died, the avatar was reborn as an air nomad, the kid who we encountered in that abandoned village. During Sazin's reign, he started the war by killing the air nomads in order to stop the cycle. Unfortunately, that boy escaped and has now appeared after being gone for 113 years. She explained. Naruto rubbed his chin and thought, coming with a theory on how the young monk survived. So chronologically he's 113, but biologically he's 13. He must put himself in some form of suspended animation in order to pull that off, but doing so will one day take a toll on his person. Yes, but that's not all. From what I read in the history books, he has a defense mechanism called the avatar state. In that form his bending skills are at their maximum, and he has no equal when in that form. Azula explained. Interesting, but I'm pretty sure that such power comes at a price. If this avatar state is as powerful as you say, then it must have a major weakness. She gave him a look that said explain, since she wanted to know Naruto's point of view on the terms of power. Trust me, I know this from experience. Every power, no matter how great it is, has a weakness. I may have mastered the ability to using all the elements in my bloodline, but I also have my limits. I'm not invincible in any way, shape or form. I'm just powerful like you are. He replied. Naruto knew and faced opponent and allies that were strong in their own right, but knew that they could be killed or weakened if pushed enough, and knew there was no such thing of an invincible warrior. Even his ancestor, the Rikudo Sennin, while powerful, was still human. So you're gonna be our 4th member, Naruto? A voice behind them asked, and Azula and Naruto turned their heads to see Mai and Ty Lee smiling. Naruto smiles and stand up, as does Azula. Yep, it appears so, Mai-chan. He says, which confused the 3. What does chan mean, Naruto? Ty Lee asks. It's a form suffix the people at the place I used to live in use. They are chan, san, and sama. San and sama are used as a form of respect to those older than you or to those of royalty, while suffixes like chan or chibi are used on those that are younger than you. There are also others like Haim, which means princess, Oyabun, which means boss or chief, and Ikki, which means big brother, and Eki, which means big sister. There are other suffixes like ni, nai, ani or wani, which also refer to brother, sister, or older brother and older sister, and for little brother or sister, you use a tauto or a maudo. There's also another suffix called kun, which from my point is used in respect for a male by either good friends, lovers, or a couple, and the same with chan, but you'd refer to me as Naruto-kun. One example is Azula. I'd use Haim in her name since she is a princess, and I'd use chan for you, Mai and Ty Lee, since you're younger than me. Azula would also call her brother Zuko Ani or just Nai, since he's older than her. He explained while they took that information in. Wait, Naruto, what about relatives or older people like my father, mother, uncle, and grandfather? Azula asks. For your dad it would be Tu or Oyaji, and for your mother it would be Ka. Now for your uncle you'd use a Tuji, for your grandfather it would be Oji, and for you and your grandmother it would be Ba or Abe, depending on how old they are. He stated. Ty Lee blinks and scratches her head in confusion. Wow. Those are some strange suffixes. She said while Naruto snickers. Don't worry, you'll understand them in the future. He assured the girl, who smiled and nods her head. All of that aside, Naruto, what is it that you specialize in aside from using all the elements? Azula wondered, mainly due to the speed, agility, and prowess he showed facing 5 benders, with one being a firebending master. Like she was amazing, since she still couldn't get the one-sided fight out of her mind, since he made it look easy. Well, where I came from, I was raised and trained to be an assassin, to do missions that ranged from escorting important clients and documents, as well as being a bodyguard for a noble, to assassinating a potential threat. I'm skilled in the art hand-to-hand combat, using all forms of weapons and weapon styles, ranging from using senbon, which are needles, to a massive blade called as zanbatsu. I'm also well adverse in human anatomy and its functions, allowing me to read a person's muscle movement as well as their psyche. I can knock a person out by hitting a certain point in the human body, put them in a death-like state, cripple them permanently, or outright kill them if I use a weapon like a kunai or shuriken, which are throwing blades. I can strike them in one of the 8 vital parts of the human body, which are the liver, lungs, jugular vein, clavicle vein, spinal cord, brain, kidneys, or heart. I am also skilled in stealth and to the point where my targets or opponents don't even notice I'm near them. I can practically sneak up on anyone or through a highly secured place without getting caught, and I'm also skilled in tracking. I can even cast illusions to distract or weaken my opponent, and I also have a huge amount of stamina, meaning I won't go tired for a very long time. After his explanation, the girls were silent, but on the inside they each had an ear-splitting grin on their face. They just hit the jackpot and knew with him on their side they stood a higher chance of catching the Avatar. I'll have to keep him a secret from father for a while. If he found out that there was another person like the Avatar and is even more powerful, there's no telling what will happen. I already know that I'm nowhere close to being on Naruto's or my father's level, since he managed to injure Uncle Iroh, who is still stronger than my father despite his age. Azula thought as she knew once word got out about Naruto, every since noble, bounty hunter or assassin will be out to capture or kill him. Now I highly doubt anything would get boring with you around Naruto. Mai said while Naruto grinned. You have no idea how right you are, Mai. So do any of you have a plan with how to deal with the kid when we see him and his friends again? Naruto asks. Azula was about to speak up but then stops and notices the fur trail Appa left. The Avatar's pet flying bison left a trail of fur for us to follow, so it'll be easy for us to track him, she said. After the girls got their things packed up and Naruto dispelled the house, the 4 got back in the tank and followed the trail. Time skip. 3 days have passed since Naruto joined Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee in their search for the Avatar. Right now they stopped to get water and take a break. Naruto was currently doing some scouting while the girls refilled their water supply. Azula got her water pouch filled up and stood up until Naruto appeared in her line of sight, surprising them. Hhhh. Azula cried out in surprise, clutching her chest while he smirked. Naruto stopped doing that. His smirk turned into a teasing smile as she gave him a heated glare. Why? It's kind of fun seeing the fearless princess of the Fire Nation nearly jump out of her skin due to me appearing out of nowhere, he said, acting smug. Mai and Ty Lee giggled from behind their friend but turned the other way when Azula glares at them and back at Naruto, who was still smirking. I am so tempted to fire lightning bolts at you right now, she muttered while he snickered. All joking aside, I found a bigger trail of the flying bison's fur and it seemed to stop at the edge of a desert that seems to go on for miles, he stated, getting wide eyes from them. Naruto, the so-called desert that goes on for miles is the Siwang Desert. It is the largest and hottest desert in the world and only those who are physically and mentally fit can travel through that place. It's also called the Desert of the Dead and there is no form of water or barely any life forms inhabiting the place, Azula explained. So it would be foolish for us to travel through there, right? Naruto asks and got nods from them. Well then I guess I'm a fool because wherever the brat's heading, I am heading as well, he said, which caused them to fall over and get back up on their feet and looked at him like he's crazy. What's wrong with you? In case you haven't noticed, but my tank won't get us through that desert due to all the sand dunes formed around the area and there's also the sand benders and raiders that lurk through that place, the Fire Princess says frantically. Yeah, Naruto, how do you expect us to get across that godawful place? The only way that's happening is if you have the ability to traverse through it, which I highly doubt, Mai said as she twiddled with a throwing knife. She failed to notice the smirk that formed on Naruto's face, but Azula did. Mai, Azula started to say as Naruto walks a few feet away from them and slams his hand on the ground. Uchiha's no jutsu, he says, and a large explosion of smoke bursts forward. When the smoke clears, a white snake with red stripes and yellow slit eyes who was twice as big as Manda appeared coiled up. She takes a look around to adjust to her surroundings and sees Naruto, who was waving at her, and 3 girls with 2 who were wide-eyed and just stared at her. Hey Shiroi-san, it's been a while, Naruto called out, and she seemed to smile and lower her head down to get a better view of him, and once she did her eyes lit up in excitement and happiness. Naruto-kun, said Blonde, suddenly found himself being crushed to death as the massive snake wrapped her tail around him and nuzzled him with her nose. The others' sweat dropped as they took in the scene where tears fell down her face as she slowly crushed her summoner, who was turning purple and blue to death in happiness. Everyone thought you were dead after your battle with Toby, but I knew that the heir of the Rikudo no Sennin was still alive, she declared as she squeezed him tighter. After a few minutes of struggling, Naruto managed to slip out of her coils and leaps out of her grip. He desperately sucks in a large amount of air, regaining his color back, while his healing factor mended any bruised and possibly broken bones and organs, mentally thanking himself for placing a thin and strong layer of earth chakra around his body, lest he get crushed to death like last time. It's good to see you, Toshiroi-chan, he said back while the snake wiped her tears away with the tip of her tails. So how may I be of service to you, Naruto-kun? Shiroi asked her summoner. Well, me and my new team here need safe passage through a desert not far from here. He pointed to the three girls where Ty Lee and Mai were flabbergasted at the sight before and tried rub their eyes, hoping that this was a dream. So I considered that you can easily get us through there no problem. Naruto finished as he motioned for the girls in the back to approach him as the snake eyed the surprised and stunned girls and flicked her forked tongue. She looks back at Naruto and speaks. They are strong in their own way, Naruto-kun. A mischievous gleam formed in her eyes as she glanced at him and the three girls. So are you gonna use your clan rights and claim them as your future mates? After all, you'll need a few to keep you in check. She asks humorously, which made Naruto face fault and the other three girls blush when she said that. Said blonde got up and shot an annoyed glare at Shiroi. Shiroi, now is not the time for that. Stop hanging out with Bunta, he's a bad influence just like Hiro Kyofu. He yelled while she snickered. Haha, sorry, just couldn't help it since it's so easy to get you riled up. She replied. His brow twitched in annoyance and made a mental note to get back at the Toad Chief later on and was about to speak up until Mai and Ty Lee appeared in front of him with wide eyes. How did you do that? And how can that giant snake talk? They both cried and pointed at Shiroi. Naruto took a step back with a surprised look on his face due to see them move at speeds only he, his father, and the Nidaime Rikudo could. That's what I wondered when he summoned a dragon to take us back to the tank and it could also talk. Azula said, which caused the two girls' eyes to bug out and look at her like she was nuts. He summoned a talking dragon. Boy my, Ty Lee, stop yelling before I lose my hearing. Naruto said as dug his index fingers into his ears to get his hearing back while Azula shook her head. Mai and Ty Lee looked down at the ground and tints of pink appeared on their faces while Shiroi watched the scene in hidden amusement. Now then, you four hop on my head and hold on. Shiroi instructed while the four of them get on top of her head. Once they sat down on her head, Ty Lee sat on his left and wrapped her arms around his arm. Mai did the same with his right arm and Azula, much to his shock, sat in his lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. It took all of Naruto's willpower not to blush or get a nosebleed due to the fact that three hot and beautiful girls' bodies were pressed against him and was trying not to think about the certain thoughts that went in his brain in place that he needed to revive his clans with. Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee on the other hand had their own thoughts. Whoa, his arm is so muscular. I wonder if he can summon cute animals. I'll ask him later. Ty Lee thought. Wow. Naruto truly is an amazing person. I wonder what other secrets you have and what did the snake mean about clan rights and taking more than one mate? Mai thought. How in the world is Naruto capable of summoning animals as well as appearing and disappearing? It should all be impossible to do. But on the other hand, he does smell nice. Wait, where did that come from? Azula thought while his face heated up a little. That was when Shiroi spoke up. Alright, you four hang on tight because I'm really fast. She said. The girls did that and that was when Shiroi zipped through the forest like a bullet while the girls' screams echo through the forest. Siwang Desert. In the middle of the desert, a giant white snake was slithering through the sand with four people on top of her head. They were Naruto, Azula, Mai, Ty Lee, and Shiroi the snake summon. Naruto placed a barrier around them which kept the sand and wind out and the girls were currently enjoying the ride. This is so cool. This beats traveling in that metal tank, huh, Mai? Ty Lee says while the weapon user nods and brushes a strand of her hair back. Azula and Naruto were looking around the desert for any sign of the avatar. Azula was looking through a handheld telescope while Naruto used the Tmege no Jutsu telescope technique to search through the desert with a small glass ball like the third Hokage used to use in Konoha before he died. Azula wasn't kidding when she said that there was barely any life in the desert. Heck, this place reminded him too much of Suna's desert, but it wasn't as hot or humid as this place. Azula noticed what looked like a tower-like structure not far from their location. She then taps Naruto on the shoulder and got his attention. Naruto, I see a tower right over there. Azula informed, pointing to the east. Naruto uses his Rinnegan to zoom into the location she pointed at and saw a tower sticking out of the middle of some sand dunes and two life forms. That's not all. There are two life forms standing outside of the tower. One's the blind earthbender and the other seems to be the flying bison. Shiroi, stop. The white snake nods her head and stops in her tracks and coils up. Why did we stop, Naruto? Ty Lee asks the blonde who narrowed his eyes, focusing his attention on Toph and the bison. That girl is a sensor and power type, Ty Lee. She must have the ability to sense vibrations through the ground as well as read a person's body language, and since she's blind, there's a possibility her other senses are stronger than that of a normal person's, so we have to take caution with this one. He answered in a serious tone. I could block her earthbending Kai like I did to the waterbender once. Ty Lee offered, but Naruto shook his head. No, that's too risky, especially with that bison around. He'll catch your scent and alert the girl to your presence, which would put you in even greater danger. The wind current speed also makes it worse since we're not downwind and the creature will be able to pick up on our scents a lot faster," he explained. Azula took this info in and couldn't help but agree and trust Naruto's judgment on this since he has more experience with this kind of thing than she did. After thinking about it for a few minutes, the Fire Princess spoke up. "Then what do you propose we do then, Naruto?" Azula asks. Mai and Ty Lee were surprised at her question. Usually Azula prided herself in her skills and wouldn't ask for any form of help whatsoever, not even from them unless she asked for it. They wondered if Naruto already had an effect on her personality since she seemed to be more relaxed with him around. Naruto thinks about it for a while and the young sage did a few hand seals and from his body a wood clone formed, surprising the trio when they saw a second Naruto manifest from the original. What is that?" Ty Lee stuttered out as the clone stood straight up and glances back at Naruto and the three girls. "This ladies is a cloner's second manifestation of me and can be used in reconnaissance missions, espionage, or to assist me in battle," he answered. The acrobat approached the clone and pokes him a couple of times, much to the clone's irritation. "Stop that," he said, causing the bubbly girl to eep and zip behind Mai while Naruto and Azula chuckle. "I forgot to mention that aside from being my replica, they can also have the ability to think on their own and carries a portion of my knowledge and techniques," he informed the girls before pulling out a tri-pronged kunai with a mixture of seals on it and looks at his clone. "Once the girls and I are inside the tower, I want you to keep that earthbender and the bison distracted as long as possible." "How will we get into the tower, Naruto?" Azula wondered as he turned his gaze at the tall building. "I want each of grab onto me and whatever you do, don't let go for even a second," he warned. Azula noticed the seriousness in his voice and nodded while he threw the kunai into the entrance of the tower. Mai and Ty Lee each grab an arm while Azula wrapped her arm around his waist, each keeping a firm grip on him before vanishing in a flash of yellow. Wan Shai Tong's library. In a flash of yellow, Naruto, Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee appeared before the kunai as well as in the middle of what appeared to be a large library filled with countless books. The blonde sage looked around and whistled lowly at the countless books in the place. If Sakura was here she'd be having a field day. He noticed the girls were looking at the countless books but haven't released him yet. "Girls, I know I'm cute, but could you please release me?" he asked with humor etched in his voice. Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee looked back at him and noticed they were still holding on to him and in an instant released him with a tint of pique forming on their cheeks, much to his amusement. "I have to say I've never seen so many books in my life." Ty Lee nodded in agreement. "Yeah, we didn't even have this many books in the Fire Academy." Mai on the other hand scoffs. "Thank I those days are over because studying from those books were troublesome," she commented. Naruto heard the word troublesome leave her lips and snickered, getting the knife user's attention. "What's so funny?" she questioned. "Sorry Mai-chan, but when you said troublesome, it reminded me of a friend of mine named Shikamaru," he replied. "He was one of the sharpest minds from my village who was able to plan ahead of his opponents and was also a keen strategist who could think up plans on the go as easily as breathing, but was lazy as hell and spent his time either cloud watching or playing strategy games. Honestly, if the guy had any ambition he'd be a threat even to me." Mai however huffed at the insinuation that she was some kind of lazy bum. "For the record, I'm not lazy, I just don't like being bored or doing boring things," she informed. Azula was about to say something, but her eyes widened when she saw a large owl stare down at them. Mai and Ty Lee looked up as well and were wide-eyed as well. Naruto didn't look as shocked as they were and kept a calm and impassive expression. "That's a big bird," he muttered as the giant owl spread its wings and descended to the ground and loomed over them. "Greetings humans, what brings you to my lair?" the owl questioned in a deep and otherworldly tone as he looked at them with a keen eye. Naruto steps forward with his Rinnegan activated with a stoic and calm expression on his face. "Wouldn't it be wise for the person who speaks first to give his or her name before asking for the name of the guests?" Naruto replied calmly as he was eye to eye with the owl. The giant bird of prey gazed into Naruto's eyes and was surprised to sense the power flowing through them before nodding. "My apologies, I am Wan Shai Tong, the spirit of knowledge, guardian of this great library, and he who knows 10,000 things," he introduced. Naruto nodded in acknowledgement as the owl introduced himself. "Greetings Wan Shai Tong-san, I am Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, successor of the Rikudo Sennin or the Sage of the Six Paths, and these are my companions Princess Azula of the Fire Nation and her friends Ty Lee and Mai," he introduced with a bow. "It is a pleasure to meet you all, but I'm afraid you must leave as humans have not been allowed to enter my library for centuries due to abusing the knowledge they seek for their own gain," Wang Shai Tong said, but a sly smile took form on Naruto's face. "Now we both know that is not true my friend because I know the Avatar and his friends are here as well, so do we not deserve a chance to learn a bit of the vast knowledge this place holds?" Naruto requested. The spirit was surprised that this young man before him was able to see through his lie so easily and looked for any form of deceit in the sage's eyes. Very well then, I see no form of deceit in your eyes, young sage, so I'll allow you and your friends to use my library and any other sources to your liking. His gaze turned fierce and his feathers bristled a bit, but know this, if you betray my trust, I will not hesitate to end you or your companions. Naruto nodded in agreement. I give you my word and swear on my title, clan's honor and life that we will not abuse any of the knowledge your library holds and will take responsibility should we break your trust. He assured the owl, who accepted his word and the trust laced in them. Before I allow you passage to my library, do you each have anything to contribute? Azula looks through her travel bag and pulls out a scroll. I have a scroll and a journal with a scroll containing instructions on advanced firebending and lightning generation and my great-grandfather's diary. She offered the great owl, who brought his right wing forward in front of scroll and book before pulling the appendage back with the items vanishing. These will make a fine addition, especially the firebending scroll and history of you ancestor princess, but I advise that you follow your own path and not the one others made for you, as it will end in turmoil. He advised. The princess looked a little troubled but nods. Ty Lee stepped forward with a scroll and held it out. I offer a scroll on my Kai blocking technique that I've learned and mastered. She offered, and like the others, they vanished under his wing. This is acceptable. Kai blocking is a very rare and new art, so you must be highly skilled in learning such an art. The acrobat smiles at the praise before stepping back and allowing Mai to step forward with a manual. It's not much, but I have a manual on weapons forgery for the special knives I made and one with the blueprints on the design of the projectile launchers I keep hidden under my sleeves. She offered and got a nod of acceptance from him. These will indeed make a fine addition to the weapons sector of my library, and he turned his gaze to Naruto. And what do you offer, young sage? A couple of things that will interest you greatly. He pulls out one of the large scrolls on his back and places it on the ground. The owl watches with interest as Naruto unravels the scroll that had several odd containment seals on it, taps one of them. And in a puff of smoke, one scroll and 3 books appear. My first contribution to you is a scroll that contains the knowledge of my mother's clan, who were respected and feared for their skills in Fuinjutsu or sealing arts. The next book was white with a yin-yang symbol on the cover. This is a book based on the history of my ancestor who once saved the world I came from destruction, and the creator of all the ninja arts, as well as the history of the elemental nations. The other book had a green cover that said Tale of the Gutsy Ninja. This is the first novel my godfather wrote during his time as a shinobi and describing the nature of the human heart in various forms, both positive and negative. Wan Shai Tong reached out and swipes the items under his wings and they vanish. These offerings will be very interesting to read, as will the history of you people and the last contribution. Naruto had to suppress a huge grin that was threatening to escape his visage and held out a limited edition gold-covered Icha book with Uriah's signature written on the left-hand corner. This I believe you'll personally find very entertaining. He hinted, getting a curious expression from Wan Shai Tong. He takes the book in his feathered appendage and uses the other to open up the book and read the inscriptions of the pages for a little before a tint of pink appeared on his face and giggles in a manner that the girls didn't like for some odd reason. Naruto had to fight the urge to laugh out at their expression and the one from the Wan Shai Tong. Oh my, this I shall cherish greatly, he said to himself as he turned a page and continued to giggle again before stopping and looking at the group. Enjoy the library, he said before moving backwards into the shadows with a giggle echoing around the area. Naruto shook his head in amusement that a spirit as great and wise as the owl was a pervert. Kyofu was right, everyone was a pervert at heart, no matter who they were. Azula was the first to speak up once Wan Shai Tong was gone. Naruto, if I may ask, what was that book you gave the spirit of knowledge and why did he giggle like that? She questioned with a hint of her demanding tone laced in her words. Ty Lee and Mai were also curious about the book, while Naruto was inwardly sweating bullets that they each had their gaze on him. Trust me, the lesser you know the better, was all he said. Mai and Ty Lee nodded in acknowledgement, but Azula didn't look too convinced and vowed to herself to find out about the contents of that book. Now then, let's enjoy the library. But I thought we were here to catch the avatar, not read up on the history of the nations. Azula thought, only to receive a smirk from Naruto. Patience, Harem, we'll get the cue ball soon enough, but it wouldn't hurt to find some knowledge that would benefit us in the future. After all, knowledge is power, and from my experience, if they're looking for a way to end this war soon, then it's possible that there will be some info in this library that will help them find a weakness in your home's defense and could spell disaster for your nation and people, he says. Azula wanted to make a remark but stopped and thought about it, since it was a possibility that the Avatar's group could find such a thing in this vast library. You do make a good point, but what can we do? You did promise the Great Spirit that we wouldn't abuse the knowledge in his library, and the one thing I never want to do is anger a spirit, because that is a fate worse than death, she said. Naruto pondered on this before a smirk crossed his face. You leave that to me, Haim. Go ahead and start finding some books and scrolls that could benefit us. I'll be checking on the bald monk and his group to see what they're up to." With that, Naruto vanished in a burst of wind, leaving the girls to do their part. Planetary calendar room. From the shadows, Naruto followed Aang's energy signature into a room that looked similar to a planetarium and had to admit this was a very impressive invention. He watched Sokka turning the dial a few times in order to match the calendar and dates and hear him wanting to find out about the darkest day in Fire Nation history. He watches the symbol of the sun and moon rotate until they merge and stop in place. Hey, what happened? Why did the sun and moon stop in place? Does this date represent the darkest day in the Fire Nation? She asked. SHH. Katara, don't speak so loud in front of the fox who's buddies with the owl. He whispered to his sister and saw the kitsune whimper in a dejected manner. So I was right. They are misusing this place for this war. I think I should inform my fine feathered friend about this. He vanished in the shadows once more to find Wan Shai Tong. Different sector of the library. The animal spirit was perched on a statue, giggling quietly to himself as he was reading the 10th chapter of the masterpiece Naruto gave him. Oh, this book keeps getting better and better. The sage's grandfather is a true artist to create something so amazing, he said to himself. Naruto appeared before the owl, crouching down slightly and stood up, only for a sweat drop to form on the back of his head as he saw the spirit's giggling form. Okay, spirits are definitely perverts. He thought before coughing out loudly. Wan Shai Tong paused and looks up to see Naruto with an amused expression on his face, and the owl also sported a look of annoyance. Is there a reason why you've come to interrupt my reading, young sage? He asked with a hint of irritation in his voice. My apologies, friend, but the reason I was searching for you is because someone is misusing the knowledge of your library. The owl's expression turned serious at what Naruto told him. And who would dare commit such an act and use my knowledge for their own insidious gain? He asked in a voice full of fury and coldness. I'm afraid a member of the Avatars group by the name of Sokka is using your invention in the planetarium to find out the day the Fire Nation would be vulnerable due to a war Azula Haim's great-grandfather started and wants to use that knowledge to possibly invade the land on its weakest day. Naruto answered. Anger flashed through the spirit's eyes when Naruto informed him of this deceit. What? How dare they, after giving their word they wouldn't violate my trust for a war, no less. They will pay for their treachery. Naruto nodded in agreement. I agree, my friend. The use of your knowledge was a privilege. They deceived you, proving they hold no form of honor, especially the Avatar, who I believe was supposed to be honor-bound and not deceitful, and I apologize if their actions have broken what last ounce of trust you had for the human race. He apologized by giving a slight bow to the owl. There's no need for you to apologize in their behalf, Naruto, because unlike them, you are honor-bound by your word, and for informing me of this treacherous action I am indebted to you. He thanked before his expression grew dark. And now I must deal with the ones who have deceived me with their lies and show them why the spirit of knowledge is not one to trifle with. The owl left while Naruto went to go get his teammates. Outside the tower. The Moku Bunshin was perched on top of the tower watching Toph, who was leaning against the tower with a bored expression on his face. He had Shiroi wait under the sand until he gave her the signal in restraining the air bison. She looks bored, maybe I can give her a little bit of excitement. With that he leapt off the tower and lightly descends into the sand. He decided to pull it Tsunade and rears his fist back and slams it into the ground, creating a large shockwave that sent Toph and Appa tumbling back a couple of meters. The earthbender groans and slowly sat up, gripping her throbbing head. Okay, that was not an earthquake. She muttered. No, it wasn't, that was me. See, clone, Naruto spoke out. Toph's eyes widen when she recognizes the voice, and then they narrow dangerously. If you're looking for an older version of Toph, go to my profile. She turned toward the direction of the sound with a furious look on her face. You're the guy who rescued Azula and injured the old man. Appa growled and snorted as Toph gritted her teeth in her anger. See, Naruto looked back at her and folded his arms. I know. I was there. He said, which made Toph clench her fists in anger. Do you not care that you could have killed the guy, let alone us? What did we ever do to you? She yelled, demanded as the sand rippled around her, getting a raised eyebrow from Naruto. Nothing, but when I see a person being outnumbered and cornered with no way, I can't help but intervene. Anyways, we're wasting time and I'm afraid I don't have the time to play with you. Not that I wouldn't mind, because who would not enjoy the company of such a strong, beautiful woman like yourself? He said in a teasing manner. Toph blushed a little from the compliment but then smirked and regained her as she entered her signature earthbending stance. Bring it on. I'm Toph Beifrong, the greatest earthbender to ever live, and I've beaten guys who are all talk and no walk just like you. She declared until she felt a little unnerved when he started chuckling. I admire your passion, Toph, but unfortunately for you, he vanished and appeared behind Toph with his back turned to her. I am on a whole different level than those you have faced. Her eyes widened when she heard his voice behind her. When did he? Putin. Jiraiyashi, wind release. Gale palm. Toph was sent flying by a powerful gust of wind. See Naruto released from his palm when he spun around and swung his arm forward in a palm strike to her back. She hit the sand hard and her form slides across the dunes and stops for a second. See Naruto smirks as Toph gets up with a surprised look on her face despite having the wind knocked out of her for a few seconds. You can airbend. But how? Only Twinkle Toes could do that. She questioned. The clone snorts a little from the nickname Toph gave to Ong but kept a straight face. I am the sage of the 6 paths and master of the elements, and the cue ball skill of the wind pales in comparison to mine. But that he dashes towards Toph, who was scowling due to having some difficulty sensing his movements in the sand since it was less durable than earth and could only feel tiny bursts of seismic movement. Appa suddenly landed in between her and the clone, who skids to a halt but didn't get a chance to react due to the beast spinning around and swinging its flat tail downwards, slamming it into the sand and sending a strong blast of air at Naruto. It sent him flying backwards and crashes into the sand, closing the distance between him and the blind earthbender. Thanks for the save, buddy. Toph thanked and got a grunt from Appa. Naruto regains his composure and glares at the beast. So you want to play as well? His question was answered by Appa snorting and charging at the clone. If that's the case, then I have the perfect playmate for you. He brought his index finger and thumb to his mouth and lets out a high-pitched whistle. The sand underneath Appa exploded as the bison found himself being restrained by something huge and strong. Something much larger and stronger than him, and that something was Shiroi, who had the beast wrapped in her coils. Appa? Toph called out as the bison struggled in the summon's coils. She may have a slight dislike for the air bison, but that didn't mean she wanted him to get eaten by a giant snake that somehow appeared out of nowhere. She was about to help him only to feel some sand wrap around her feet, stopping her movements for a second, and scowls as she sensed some sand swirl around the clone's form in a spiral-like fashion. Not so fast, Miss Beifrong. I want to see if you can back up your claim as the greatest earthbender in the world. After all, claiming a title of that magnitude requires more than talk. He stated. The blind bender lets out a soft snort and with a swipe of her arms outwards, releasing herself from the sand that was binding her feet. Like I said earlier, buddy, bring it on, she declared as she got into the southern praying mantis stance. Naruto smiles at her enthusiasm and the sand under his feet shifts and swirls around him like a snake. Very well then, let's see who is stronger, the world's greatest earthbender or a master of the desert, he challenged. With Azula and her team. The princess and company amazed by the things they found in the Knowledge Spirits archive. Azula found several books on the most advanced forms of firebending and even the ancient styles that were based more on the movements of the dragons, who were the true practitioners of the firebending arts. Mai and Ty Lee had found a few books and scrolls that ranged from special weapons, fictional novels, and even fighting styles that didn't require elemental bending that were similar to Ty Lee's Kai blocking skills. That was when Naruto appeared beside Ty Lee, causing the girl to scream out in surprise, and Mai and Azula spun around in their fighting stances, with Mai drawing 2 curved knives, only to see Naruto rub his numb arm due to the female acrobat jabbing his arm in several places. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Naruto. Ty Lee apologized as he managed to get some feeling back into his right arm. It's okay, Ty Lee, it was my fault for scaring you like that. He replied back. Did you find them, Naruto? Azula asked her new partner and got a nod. Yeah, I did, and not only that, but I just found out that they discovered a day when firebenders lose their ability to bend and the nation will be at its weakest. He informed the Fire Princess. Her eyes widened since she just realized that there was only one day in every 100 years when firebenders lose their ability to bend. The day of the Black Sun. She whispered to herself. Pardon? It's a day when the sun and moon intertwine and those with the ability to firebend are cut off from the sun, which is the main source of our bending. My great-grandfather wrote about it in his journal, saying it was the one day where he believed that losing his ability to bend was the most drastic day in his life. Azula explained. And if they were to invade your homeland on that day, the firebenders won't be the only ones in danger, the civilians will suffer as well, since those who will attack will more than likely want to gain their retribution through them after losing their loved ones, and that is what worries me the most. Naruto informed. Azula noted his serious expression and nodded in agreement. So what do you propose we do? She suggested. Right now, gather whatever scrolls and books you've wanted to take and then we'll greet the cue ball and his friends. I want to personally see if this boy is what he claims to be in terms of being a master of the elements. Naruto answered. So you're gonna fight the avatar and measure his current level of strength? You don't think he'll be much of a challenge to you? Azula asked the blonde sage. A challenge? I wouldn't consider him to be a decent warm-up after that fight in that abandoned village, but one can never be too careful. Naruto answered. Azula nodded and thought about how the more she learned about Naruto, the more mysterious to her he became. She couldn't help that her curiosity grew more and wondered how it was possible for him to do the things no one else in the four nations could do and admired the fact that he was a good strategist and made good judgment calls. Even when she made a plan, Naruto would weigh out the pros and cons of her plots and even give her ideas that would improve her plans in finding the avatar for future references, and she highly doubted that any of the military strategists or even the academy teachers from the Fire Nation could match his level of intellect. After gathering all of the scrolls and book in a large storage scroll for safekeeping, Azula and her friends gather around Naruto and they vanish in a flash of yellow and reappear in the entrance of the planetarium where they heard Sokka boasting about finding the Fur Nation's weakness. This is great. We finally found the Fire Nation's weakness. With the solar eclipse appearing in the middle of the summer, the firebenders will be helpless and we can finally defeat the Fire Lord and pay those monsters back for what they did to us. Sokka declared with a victorious smirk on his face until a shadow hovered over the gong. They turned around and their eyes widened when they saw Wan Shai Tong staring down at them, and from the expression in his eyes he wasn't happy at all. You humans are so predictable and are also terrible liars. The owl stated and glared at Sokka's paling form. I take your word to heart when you said you wouldn't abuse my knowledge for violence, especially you avatar. The giant owl said with disdain in his voice. Please Great Spirit, you have to understand we are doing this in the name of justice and to save the ones we love. This information will keep the rest of the innocent from being hurt. Aang tried to reason, but Wan Shai Tong wasn't hearing any of their excuses and glared darkly at the avatar. Your justice is nothing more than a suppression of revenge, and now I must do what I have to do, protect what I love and unleash my form of justice, which includes ending your traitorous lives. He said while he spread his wings and prepared to attack. Hold on Wan Shai Tong, everyone turned their attention to the approaching forms of Naruto, along with Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee, much to the group's shock and fear. Allow me to deal with them in your stead, since you shouldn't have to stain their traitorous blood on your talons. The owl's eyes softened somewhat from Naruto's appearance, but still the fury he expressed for the avatar and his friends were still there. Thank you Naruto, but my honor demands retribution for their actions against me, but you and your friends have proven that you are bound to your words and have not deceived me in any way. Sokka noticed Naruto and his eyes bug out. You. He cried out, pointing an accusing finger at Naruto who didn't look the least impressed. Yes, me for a self-proclaimed warrior, you aren't that bright. Naruto remarked, getting a peeved look from the teenager. Aang and Katara couldn't help but snicker at the jab, while Azula and her friends chuckle. Sokka glared at his sister and friend with his sister looking away and Aang giving him an apologizing look. Sorry Sokka, but he did get you with that. Sokka said nothing and looks back at the owl. Please Great Spirit, you have to listen to me, that guy before you is working with the Fire Nation, the people who not only started this war but also burned a portion of your library. He said but cringes when the owl's glare intensifies, especially when he tried to point the blame at his new friends. I know who they are, but unlike you who were looking for a means for war, they came here only seeking knowledge and nothing more. This agent has called him swore an oath not to break my trust and even forfeited his life should they betray me. Aang and the others were surprised and worried because they realized that they were in big trouble and it was only getting worse. Wan Shai Tong turned to Naruto. Naruto, since they have attacked your honor in spite of their own deception, I will allow you to deal with them as you deem fit. He offered before flapping up once and landing on top of a large bookshelf. As Naruto set his gaze on the trio, Azula decided to speak up. So you all were planning on invading my homeland on the day of the eclipse, huh? Well, it would have worked if the water peasant hadn't blurted out in the open. She stated and smirked when Sokka paled at the realization. Indeed, but what can you expect from a wannabe warrior? Naruto replied while Sokka fumed at the insult to being a warrior but was ignored as Naruto set his side on the 13-year-old monk and from his facial expression, he didn't look the least impressed. So you're the Avatar? The messiah of the people, master of the elements, and the only being on this planet the Fire Lord fears. He narrows his eyes at Aang who was looking a little unnerved. I have to say I am not impressed. Hey, you better watch what you say buddy because Aang is more powerful than you can ever imagine. Sokka says only for Naruto to give him a look of annoyance. I was talking to the kid with the arrow on his forehead, not some warrior wannabe who got knocked out by his own weapon. That right there caused Sokka to remain shocked and silent. I mean really that was just plain pathetic. I'm willing to bet that you're the village idiot, Naruto stated with a smirk on his face infuriating Sokka, but then tapped his chin a couple of times. Actually no, because even a village idiot would know better than to throw a projectile at an assassin who can kill him without batting an eyelash, so you must be retarded. Now Sokka's face was red and steam escaped from his ears, while Katara, Azula, Ty Lee, and Mai had to hold in their laugh. Enough. Who are you and why are you with Azula? Aang asked demanded. Naruto however scoffed at the kid's demand and folded his arms. I have no reason to explain myself especially to a child. Naruto retorted. Aang narrowed his eyes and was about to say something, but Naruto suddenly appeared in front of Aang, surprising the monk at his speed. Before he could say anything, Naruto delivers a kick into his chest and sent him flying backwards and crashing into the wall of the planetarium. The wall shook slightly from the impact and strength behind Naruto's kick, and said Blonde looked impassive as he saw the boy's body slide down the small crater and onto the ground hard. Aang! Katara cried out and rushed to her friend's aid, as did Sokka. One Shy Tong witnessed the move and was impressed at Naruto's level of speed and strength behind his physical attack, as were Mai and Ty Lee. "Wow, he's fast," Ty Lee says, with Mai nodding in agreement. "And strong. I'm just glad he's on our side," Mai commented. Aang, on the other hand, was in pain. Never in his life has he been hit like that. He could feel his bones rattle from the kick and was having a tough time breathing. "Aang, are you okay?" Katara asked as she tried to help him up, as did Sokka. He used his staff and staggers back to his feet, glaring weakly at Naruto, who still didn't look the least impressed. "It would appear that your so-called power is highly exaggerated. Tell me, Aang, back when you and your friends had Azula cornered, what would you have done with her after she was captured and restrained?" Naruto questioned. Aang, Katara and Sokka were confused by the question, as were Azula, Mai and Ty Lee, wondering why he was asking the Avatar a question like that. "We would have turned her into the Earth Kingdom as a prisoner, why?" Aang replied. A scowl formed on Naruto's face and Aang for some reason shuddered at the fierce expression on the blonde's face and unknowingly took a step back for some reason. "So in other words, you would hand her over to people who despise the Fire Nation and leave her at the mercy of her interrogators? Are you as stupid as the wanted warrior over here?" he questioned. Aang was unaware of the cold tone in Naruto's voice and fumed at the insult. "What's the big deal? It's not like anything bad would happen to her if she was thrown in jail." He shouted, only for Naruto to release a vast amount of killer intent around the room. Sokka and Katara shivered from the unknown feeling they were getting, but Aang was getting the worst of it because for some reason when he looked into Naruto's eyes, he saw a visage of himself being stabbed through the heart by a single-edged blade and broke into a cold sweat. "Don't you know anything about war, you foolish, ignorant child?" Naruto growled out in a tone so vicious it unnerved everyone in the room. Ty Lee, however, lets out a shudder as she saw the dark expression on his face. "Whoa, Naruto's aura just went dark all of a sudden, and it feels so scary," Ty Lee said to herself as she hugged herself. "For once I have to agree," Mai said as she too felt something unsettling from Naruto, but to see the Avatar tremble before him must mean he's facing the worst of it. Azula was somewhat unnerved from the feeling she was getting, and it made her want to shiver uncontrollably until it suddenly faded and everyone managed to get their bearings back. Naruto calmed himself due to noticing that his murderous intent, while focused on Aang, did spread out and scare his teammates, so he settled down. "Let me give a brief history in war, kid. When an enemy or ally is captured by the opposing side, after getting interrogated for information, they are, as you say, sent away to prison as POWs or prisoners of war, but not in the way you think they would." He noticed Aang was growing more confused and had to keep himself from rolling his eyes at the kid's lack of knowledge of the real world. What could be worse than jail? Aang wondered, and Naruto had to keep himself from rolling his eyes. A lot of things could happen, things that would give you nightmares and make you want to kill yourself just to be free from the torture, and if you had succeeded in capturing Azula and handed her over to the Earth Kingdom, she would have been subjected to something worse than jail time, because if you had noticed, she not only the daughter of the man who is continuing this war and is a member of royalty, she is also female, and they tend to suffer in prison even more than the male gender do. He glanced at Katara's form and noticed her eyes widened in horror. "From your female friend's expression, she knows what I'm talking about." Aang glances at Katara only to see fear etched in her eyes and her body to tremble at what Naruto was implying. "Katara, what is he talking about?" he asked a female waterbender, but Naruto spoke up again. "This is gonna be short and simple for even you to understand, monk. If your friend Katara was captured and sent off to a prison, she would have been subjected to being raped on a daily basis by both male prisoners who haven't laid eyes on a female for Kami knows how long, or even by the guards for entertainment." Aang was horrified beyond belief at what he just said. Ty Lee covered her mouth as a gasp escaped and Mai was just downright terrified. If that could happen to her, then what do you think Azula would be fated to in a prison full of people who'd want to get retributions for the wrongs her family committed? Azula looked away and closed her eyes in fear of being captured and going through something so horrendous if she was caught by the enemy. But that can't be true, they would never," Aang stammered out as he tried to deny the things Naruto said, only to be on the receiving end of a glare so fierce and dark, he almost lost all of his composure. "Fool. Did spending the last 100 years in ice make you brain dead?" he snapped, causing the young monk to flinch from the sharp tone in his voice. "The world you live in is nothing but a fantasy. This is the real world, kid. In the real world things like that happen." He paused for a minute and then his expression became dark. And in the real world you can't save everybody no matter how strong you are. Aang looked down at the floor and pondered on what Naruto said until something small whizzed past him and hit the wall with a thud and Katara crying out in shock and pain, causing Aang to snap out of his stupor and turn around to see Katara staring at the rip on the sleeve of her shoulder and notice a red spot forming around the cut. The waterbender grips her shoulder for a few seconds, pulls her arm away and stares at the blood, her blood in the palm of her hand and trembled. Aang noticed a shuriken embedded in the wall behind Katara and spun around glaring at Naruto. "Why did you attack her for? She did nothing to you," he shouted. Naruto on the other hand looked impassive when he threw the shuriken at Katara and hit her on the shoulder. "And? I'm the enemy and I'll use any advantage I can to get you, and that includes attacking your friends." Aang clenches his fists and grits his teeth in anger that the person before him would stoop so low as to attack bystanders, especially if they were his friends. "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?" Sokka and Katara noticed a faint glow on Aang's arrow tattoo on his head, as did Naruto, who smirked inwardly. "He's almost there, just a little push and then we'll see just how powerful the Avatar really is," Naruto thought as the faint glow started to get more noticeable. "I am doing this because people rely on this Avatar like he's some sort of god who can solve everyone's problems, fight their battles and bring everlasting peace." He spat the word peace out like it was something vile. "But look what happened, you ran away and remained hidden for the past 100 years, while countless innocent people suffered from the destruction this war caused, while wondering where their savior was and why he hasn't done anything to end the war." Aang's shame and anger grew and was directing it at Naruto, whose verbal assault was working on triggering the Avatar state, and the blonde knew he was close to seeing this so-called power. "I think the master of the four elements is nothing more than a weak, pathetic child who not only brought great shame to his predecessors but also allowed his own people to die, especially the one who was the closest thing he had to a parental figure." He noticed Aang was trembling in anger and Naruto decided to deliver the final blow. "I believe his name was Monk Gyatso, the only person to see you for who you were and not what you would become, and yet despite his attempts, you abandoned him and left him to die." Aang couldn't take the verbal assault and the arrows on his arms and head, as well as his eyes glowed white and he looked up at in fury, while said blonde remained calm and focused. Katara and Sokka saw Aang go into the Avatar state and looks of hope appeared in their eyes. Sokka grinned triumphantly. "Alright, the Avatar state. Now you're gonna get a tough guy," Sokka declared, knowing Aang could easily take this guy down with only one attack. Naruto ignored him and kept his gaze on Aang. A powerful wind current blew around the library and books and other objects were floating and twisting around the cyclone sphere Aang created. Naruto's hair and coat blew back from the powerful gust, but his facial expression remained the same. Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee were protecting their faces from the debris flying past them, but they managed to look on in wonder of Aang's Avatar state, having never seen it before, and watched as Naruto prepared to fight the Avatar at his strongest and show everyone what he was capable of. "So this is the legendary Avatar state I've heard so much about. This should be interesting." Naruto leaps back and starts to gather chakra around his form. Everyone watches as the energy shifts from blue to a gold color until a flash of light coated the entire area for a few seconds before dying down. The spectators as well as Avatar Aang were surprised to see Naruto's body shrouded in a golden aura that flowed off of him in a flame-like pattern with a series of seals and designs that looked like spirals on his shoulder, torso, and hands. His first Biju Moto, tailed beast mode, light up the once darkened room, showing his new form. His eyes were no longer deep blue, but were now golden colored with a slit pupil in both of his ocular organs, and he looked back at the stunned Avatar with a cold expression. "Now let's see what you can do, boy," he challenged. Outside the tower. The wood clone weaved to the left and right as two blasts of sand that attempted to crush him under the weight before thrusting his hand forward and shoots a tendril at Toph, who brought her hands together and separates them, splitting the tendril in half, shaping it into a spiked mace, and throws it back. Another tendril rose beside Naruto and slices the elemental crafted weapon in half. He had to admit that despite being a clone, he was actually impressed by Toph's battle prowess and how she easily managed to learn how to fight in the sand in a little amount of time, even though she was still at an advantage of only being able to mainly counter-attack. Defender evade his move due to her form of seeing and could only sense small bursts of seismic waves in the sand. He leaps up into the air and a floating platform of sand forms under him and he lands on it. He watches Toph frown and try to search for him before sensing the energy source of his creator and the Avatar. "So boss is using that form to face the Avatar in his new state," he said to himself before turning to Toph and speaks out. "I have to say, Toph, for someone so beautiful you are indeed a gifted and powerful earthbender, despite being blind." See Naruto commended to the blonde her. A tint of pink formed on her cheeks when he complimented her on her strength but regained her composure. "Thanks, you're not bad either despite being from the Fire Nation." Even though the fight was one-sided, he was impressed with how long she was able to last and could sense that she didn't have enough strength left to fight as she was losing stamina fast. Either way, it was fun fighting you, but I have to put an end of this. As he floated on the sand platform. Riksabakurik, quicksand waterfall flow, see Naruto raises his hands into the air, causing the desert dunes around him to rumble and quake. Toph's eyes widened as she sensed the grained earth shift around the area and inwardly admit that he really was a master of the desert. Her eyes widened in horror as she sensed a massive wave of sand behind her and turned around. "Aw crap, that's enough to bury the tower, and I can't let that happen." She gets into a horse dance and squeezes her fists as she attempts to summon a vast amount of sand herself. With a battle cry, she throws her hands up into the air, causing a large wall of sand to rise around her and spread outwards. A sand tsunami crashed against a wall of sand, resulting in sonic boom to echo around the dry terrain. Toph grits her teeth from the strain behind Naruto's attack and is pushed back from the sheer weight. Beads of sweat trickle down face as she struggled to keep the barrier from crushing her and the tower. As the titanic clash occurred, Toph rears back a little, bringing her foot and with one final battle cry, stomps her foot on the ground and thrusts her hands forward, causing both her wall and Naruto's technique to explode and send sand everywhere. Toph fell on her knees and panted heavily as the move took a great toll on her body and she losing consciousness. "I'm sorry Appa, please be alright," she said before collapsing and falling face first into the sand. Naruto hops off the platform and descends to the ground but lands softly on the sand next to the blind bender. He couldn't help but be impressed by her last move before scooping her up in his arms in a bridal fashion, walks towards the tower and he sets her down against the wall until her hurt Appa. He turned around to see the air bison managed to get free from Shiroi's coils but was now being ensnared in ropes by sandbenders and was struggling to free himself. The white snake, however, managed to evade capture by either crushing several of them with her tail and ate a few of the desert bandits. They were about to use their sandbending to restrain her until they were knocked away by a large sand tendril. The bandits turned around and saw Naruto was responsible for the attack and were about to return the favor, but the sage gathers a vast amount of sand that shifts and shapes into the head of Shukaku, who opens its maw and releases a devastating roar. The bandits stop in their tracks as the newcomer created the sand demon and decided to cut their losses and took the bison, using their sand gliders to sail across the desert. Later, Shiroi-san. See Naruto say to the serpent, who nods and disperses in a puff of smoke, returning to her realm while the clone turns to wood and dissolves. Back in the library. The battle between the Avatar and Rikudo Sennin was pretty much one-sided, with Naruto having the advantage. Naruto was easily evading a series of air blasts that missed him and destroyed most of the bookshelves and walls of the building. Just as he evaded another blast and landed onto a bookshelf, he froze due to gaining the memories the Moku Bunshin he had fight Toph and cursed as he was hit by a powerful air blast that sends him skidding backwards and stops before he nearly falls over the edge. Sokka whoops in joy as he saw the blonde get hit by one of the air blasts. "Alright, nice shot on." Sokka cheered and grinned arrogantly at Azula and her friends. "Looks like your friend isn't gonna last long, ladies." He mocked, but they ignored him and continued to watch the fight. Naruto vanished in a flash of yellow as an air wave destroyed another section of the library. "Not bad, kid, but your control needs work." He inhales some air into his mouth and his chest expands as he adds a large amount of wind chakra into his lungs. Putin. Mugen de Toppa, wind release. Infinite great breakthrough. He releases a powerful wind blast that heads straight for Avatar Ong, who increases the size of his wind barrier, but the force from the attack was so great that it sends him sailing backwards. "Ong." Katara cried out as she saw the last hope of the world crash into the pillar that was collapsing, and while Naruto stood in his spot with his arms folded, sporting a bored expression on his face, no, the boy wasn't dead due to sensing his negative emotions. "Get up, boy, I know that attack didn't finish you off yet." He calls out, and his answer was a giant fireball erupting from the pillar and expanding as it sailed across the room and towards Naruto. He sighs in annoyance of the straightforward attack and rears his head back. Suiton. Sujinheki, water release. Water wall. He expels a large quantity of water from his mouth and rises in front of him. When the fireball makes contact, the colliding elements turn into steam until it clears out of the way. "Let me show you a real fire attack." Kaiten. Nkamasitsu fire release. Great fire destruction. He takes a deep breath and unleashes a massive stream of white fire that incinerated everything in its path. Ong's eyes widened and knew even in his avatar state Real would die if he was hit by a fire blast of that magnitude and used airbending to hover over the wave. The heat from the technique caused the damaged section of the library to not only be reduced into ashes but became even hotter than the heat outside the desert. "Well, now that is hot." Ty Lee commented as she felt the heat from the attack, with Mai and Azula agreeing. As the ground from beneath them shook, several large amounts of debris hit the ground, causing Sokka to cry out. "Ah." If this keeps up, they'll bury us in the library. Naruto was about to make another move, but stops and inspects his surrounding, noticing the place really was falling apart and cursed inwardly as he allowed himself get caught up in the fight between him and the Avatar. Damn it, if this continues the girls will get hurt, I'll have to end this now. He deactivates the chakra mode and returns to his normal form as Ong hovered over him. Sorry kid, but the fun's over. Well, your form is powerful, you lack the control to use it properly and are just throwing random attacks at me and causing unneeded damage, and had this been a populated area, countless people would have been injured or killed. The Avatar narrows his eyes at Naruto, who showed no fear of him overall. I'm rather disappointed since I was only using less than a tenth of my strength as a test, and if I wanted to kill you, you would already be dead. Silence. What you have done is unforgivable, said the Avatar as he sounded like he was talking as one with many other voices. You side with the Fire Lord whose family has caused nothing but imbalance in this world, and now you will pay with your life. The girl's eyes widen in horror when the boy stated that he would kill Naruto and were about to tell him to run, but stopped when they saw Naruto remain calm and just stood there, not the least bit affected by the threat of the monk threatening to kill him, and scoffs. Spare me the death threats kid unless you've got the power to back them up, and unfortunately for you, he activates the Rinnegan, brings his right arm up and aims his palm at the monk. You don't, Shinra Tensei, heavenly subjugation of the omnipresent god. The Avatar didn't get the chance to strike due to being hit by the powerful invisible force and went sailing across the room like a bullet, crashing through several bookcases and hitting a wall hard enough to knock him out of the Avatar state and render him unconscious. Katara and Sokka quickly ran to the location Ong landed in, while Naruto shook his head in disappointment. Unknowingly, a large piece of ceiling cracked around until it was loose and fell down to where Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee were. A small piece of rubble landed beside Ty Lee, who noticed it and looks up, only to scream as the large piece of debris descended. Azula looked up as did Mai, and their eyes widened in fear, knowing that they couldn't outrun a piece of debris of that size. Naruto appears in front of them and brings his hand up, firing a small blast of gravity that reduces it into dust. Are you girls alright? He asked, and his answer was Ty Lee glumping him and almost made him lose his footing. Yeah, we're good. Mai complied as she dusted off her clothes, but sweat dropped when she saw Ty Lee rub her head against his chest with her arms around his waist, and it grew when she saw Azula's brow twitch at the affection the acrobat was showing to the blushing blonde. Ty Lee, since we're fine, would you be so kind as to let Naruto go and go search for the exit? She asked sweetly, but Naruto knew that from the strain, it wasn't a sweet gesture in any form, and detected a small hint of jealousy in the princess's voice. Ty Lee was unaware, but lets Naruto go and nods happily before cartwheeling away. Okay, he looked around to see the Avatar and his friends gone and sensed them outside of the tower. Looks like they got away from us. Azula states, and Naruto nods. Yeah, sorry about that, Haim, I got too caught up in the fight and endangered you three. He apologized, but Azula shrugs it off and pats him on the shoulder. It's alright Naruto, we'll get them next time, but for now we'll head back to the entourage and rest for a bit. She assured the blonde ninja, and for some reason she looked a bit sheepish. And for what it's worth, I'm glad you're not hurt, and the fight was pretty amazing. Naruto smiled as she looked away with a blush forming on her face. Yeah Naruto, you actually worried us for a while there, but it's good to see no harm come to you. Mai admitted with her arms folded, only to be on the receiving end of a one-armed hug by a grinning Naruto. Oh what Mai-chan, I didn't know you were worried about little Olemi, I feel so special knowing you cared. He teased with a fox-like grin on his face, while the knife thrower blushed and averted her gaze from his, but was secretly enjoying the hug, not that she'd admit it out loud. Wait, where is our large feathered friend? I hope he didn't get caught in the attacks. Said Owl descended towards them and landed on the ground, folding his wings in place, and while he was a little ruffled, he was not harmed in the least. Fear not, I am okay. Naruto was about to speak up until a pink blur aka Ty Lee landed behind Azula. Guys, I found the exit, she said loudly, causing Aluza to jump. She lost her balance and tripped towards Naruto and Mai, trying to grab them both to regain her footing, but ended up dragging them down and into a mess of tangled bodies. The two girls groaned and shook their heads only to hear muffling noises underneath them. They looked down to see Naruto under them and their breasts smothering his face while he was waving his arms around frantically. Their faces turned scarlet and they instantly jump off the blonde, who sat up gasping for air. Okami, I thought I was gonna die. He cried as he regained some color back on his face until he had his sight on Azula and Mai, who had their backs turned to him, scarlet-faced and covering their chests with their arms. Naruto's face heated from what happened earlier. Ty Lee was giggling, and Wan Shai Tong chuckles at his new friend's reaction. I think I'm gonna go check to make sure that the exit is clear. Oh, and sorry about the damage to the library. It's alright, most of the things in those sectors were greatly worn out and my servants will fix the place up. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a book to get back to reading. When he vanished into the shadows, Naruto's brow twitched when he heard the spirit giggle perversely and muttered, "Hero spirit. Ty Lee, come on, we're gonna check to see if the coast is clear." She nodded happily and joined with Naruto, leaving Azula and Mai by themselves. Mai. Yes. When we get back to the entourage, remind me to kill Ty Lee and fry Naruto with a blast of lightning. She informed her friend. Sure, just remind me to turn her into a pincushion and use Naruto for target practice once you're done with them. Mai says. Agreed. Naruto and Ty Lee were getting close to finding the tower they entered through to get in the library, only to stop and feel a slight shiver go up their spine. Naruto, I just got this weird vibe, and it's not a good one, because for some reason I'm afraid Mai and Azula will do something to us when we get back. She said with the blonde sage nodding in agreement. Same here, Tai-chan, but I think I'm gonna get the worst of it. He replied back before continuing forward with the female acrobat following him. After a few minutes of searching, Naruto and Ty Lee have finally found the way out of the library. See? I found it, Naruto. Ty Lee says, pointing towards the window where they had entered through and smiled brightly. Naruto smiled back in approval and at Ty Lee's bubbly enthusiasm. Yes, I can see that, good job, Ty Lee. She blushed a little from the compliment he gave her and realized that the exit was very high. She may be an accomplished acrobat, but to scale something that high would be difficult even for her. The only problem is, how do we get up there? Any idea, Naruto? Ty Lee asked, unaware of the smile forming on his face, until she found herself getting scooped up in his arms and held in bridal fashion. Eek. Naruto, what are you? She didn't get to finish her sentence due to Naruto leaping extremely high into the air and, much to her surprise and shock, was clinging to the wall via his feet before hopping off and jumping even higher, continuing to hop left and right simultaneously. To say Ty Lee was shocked was an understatement. She knew Naruto's athletic abilities were amazing, but not to this level, and couldn't help but inwardly admit that his moves made her feel like an amateur, even though she's been working on improving her agility, flexibility, and reflexes since the day she could walk. The duo landed gently on the windowsill, taking in the sight of the desert outside until Naruto sets her down beside him, knowing she could keep her balance without his assistance. She was about to ask him something, but paused as she heard arguing, as did Naruto. They both looked down to see Aang arguing with Toph about Appa. Just admitted Toph. You let those sandbenders take Appa away on purpose. The airbender accused. Toph, however, was put off by the accusation and sported a pissed-off expression at being blamed for losing the flying bison. For the last time, Aang, I didn't let them take Appa. I was trying to keep that Naruto guy we fought in that abandoned village and some giant snake from burying us in the sand, and then I passed out from exhaustion. She exclaimed, but this only made Aang scowl at her. Now I know you're lying, Toph, because I was fighting him in the library and there's no way he can be in more than one place. Naruto snorted softly, especially since the monk didn't know about his replication techniques. Just admitted. You let them take Appa because you never liked him in the first place. He was inches apart from her face even though she was a few inches taller than him. Toph's brow twitched as she sensed him in her space and didn't like it. First of all, little boy, she brought her hands up and roughly shoved him back, making him stumble and fall on his butt, mainly because she was physically stronger than him body-wise. Get out of my face, or I'll bury you neck deep in the sand and let the desert ants feast on that chrome dome you call a head. Secondly, I was out here fighting Naruto and a giant snake, so don't call me a liar, and lastly, I'm blind. Toph waved her hand in front of her face, emphasizing her disability. I can only see people using my feet, and the sand around us makes it difficult for me to pinpoint others unless I can recognize their voice. The angry nomad scowled and got back up. You know what, Toph? Ever since you joined us, you've been nothing but trouble. You're always making rude comments, complaining, and being pushy. You may be the self-proclaimed greatest earthbender in the world, but what good are you if you couldn't even be a proper lookout for us when we needed you the most, huh? Toph was stunned at the verbal attack, as were Katara and Sokka, until Aang said something he would regret. Why don't you do us a favor and get lost, or better yet go back to that prison you call a home? Everyone remained silent when Aang said that, but to Toph, those words hit harder than any other physical attack and hung her head. Katara snapped out of it and gave the 13-year-old a look of disapproval. Aang, that was totally uncalled for. I know you're upset about losing Appa, but that doesn't mean you can blame Toph. She chastised. Aang glares at her and was about to speak up, but then realized that the sand underneath them was shaking violently, courtesy of Toph. She was squeezing her fist to the point where her knuckles were white and was biting her lower lip with her eyes clenched shut. She lets out a scream laced with fury and rage, bringing her arms back. She stomps the soft sand hard with her right foot and throws her arms forward, unleashing a blast of sand which bypassed Sokka and Momo and struck Aang directly in the chest, causing him to fly backwards and crash into the sand hard, leaving Katara and Sokka speechless. Toph was sporting a furious expression on her face as she glared in Aang's direction, while the monk groans in pain. Fine jackass, if that's the way you feel then we're done because I'm not gonna be a sifu to some pathetic excuse of an avatar. I quit. She screamed before stomping off around the other side of the pillar and curls up against the edge, hugging her legs to her body and burying her face in between her knees. Batara tries to approach the earthbender, but Toph speaks up in a voice laced with anger and hurt. Just go. As she said this, Naruto and Ty Lee watched an angry Ong morph his staff into a glider and left his 3 comrades to fend for themselves while he went to find Appa's trail. Naruto's blue eyes grew cold at Ong's behavior toward his friends because it reminded him of how the citizens of Konoha used to blame him for the loss of their loved ones when he too lost his family during the day Toby forced Kurama to attack the village before he finally changed their minds. At that moment, Naruto was tempted to go after Ong and then beat him within an inch of his life for abandoning his comrades and verbally attacking the other, who also had a sensitive past. When Ty Lee saw Naruto's expression, she reached out and put her hand in his. Naruto's gaze met hers and noticed the look of concern and worry she was expressing. Seeing he was worrying Ty Lee, Naruto managed to calm himself by releasing a sigh and gave her hand a gentle squeeze to assure the acrobatic warrior he was okay. "It's alright Tai-chan, I'm fine," he told the acrobat and smiles when her expression brightened. He looked back down and saw the water sibling also leave to find out which direction Ong went and back at Toph who didn't move from her spot. "Tai-chan, go on back to Azula and Mai-chan, I'm gonna go talk to Toph." She blinks a few times, but nods and hops back down the tower to meet up with Azula and Mai. The blonde sage hops off towards the dunes, using his skill in wind manipulation to lightly descend down the tower and gently lands beside Toph, who is unaware of his presence while he placed his hands in his pockets. Baldy really need to work on his temper. As soon as she heard his voice, Toph sprung up and leaps back in her fighting stance. Naruto didn't react and remained calm in his posture. "Relax Toph, I didn't come here to fight," Naruto informed her, but Toph ignored his statement and sent a small wave of sand at him, but he vanishes and appears to her left. "Yeah, well, too bad because I feel like fighting," she yelled and stomps her foot into the ground. When this happens, a large orb of sand appeared in front of her and with a motion of her hands, it morphed into a long pike which separated into many smaller ones, aimed it at Naruto's chest and threw it. Said blonde simply sidesteps to the right, infuriating Toph. The blind bender lets out a scream that contained a mixture of sadness and a little rage, but mostly sadness. She whips her arm back and creates a whip made of sand. "Because of you and those fire chicks I lost the only friends I had in this world and now I have to go back to that prison that used to be my home." She cried while a stream of tears fell from her face due to the memories she had of her life of solitude and lashes out at Naruto. He was able to maneuver around her wild attacks mainly because of his speed and her current state of mind and frowned as he noticed that she was exerting herself, moving at a slower pace than she did earlier. "That's enough." He suddenly vanished, surprising Toph before he reappeared binding both of her wrists over her head with his left hand and holding one of his Hiraishin kunai against her throat. The blind bender froze on the spot as she felt the cold and sharp steel touch the surface of her skin and also due to Naruto lifting her off the sand and disabling her sight, leaving her completely at his mercy. "If I wanted to kill you Toph Beifrong I would have done so when we fought earlier." She shivered at the tone in his voice and knew then and there she was at his mercy. "Now are you gonna calm down and allow me to talk with you or do I have to keep you restrained?" he questioned. She glared a little in his direction for a while but sighs in defeat. "Fine, let's talk," she mumbled. He sets her down, releasing her wrists and moves the kunai away from her neck, allowing her to regain herself. "Now to begin Toph, why are you so adamant in returning to your home? Don't you think your parents would be worried about you?" he questioned. Even though Naruto knew the reason from going through her memories, he wanted to hear it from her personally, knowing that keeping something like that bottled up would just eat at her emotionally and was unhealthy if she didn't open up. "Home? I have no home," she started off saying. "A home is a place where you can find solace in and feel safe, and where I lived was no home, it was a prison. And as for my parents, they cared more about their reputation as a rich and noble family than they did me and shut me off from the outside world, and I hated it," she said as she scowled at the memories of them keeping her in solitude, believing that the world would not accept a person with her condition. Toph then talked about how she went under the alias Blind Bandit in an underground tournament for earthbenders and becoming the champion before she met Ong, Katara, Sokka, Appa, and Momo. She honestly didn't know why she was talking to a stranger about her past, but deep down, she felt like she could trust him as she sensed him listening to her with no alternative methods of attacking her whatsoever. Naruto however was intrigued, especially when she mentioned her nobility. "So you're of noble blood? I never would have guessed with your tomboyish attitude and your attire, though my mother was the same when I learned about her and my father." A cheeky grin formed on Toph's face, but then she did a double take. "Wait, you're from a noble family too? But what nation are you from, because I've never seen anyone use more than one element and I always thought only the Avatar could pull that off. She wondered. Because I'm not from around these parts. I came from a world where there were 5 elemental nations where the people there could use more than a single element, but we didn't bend them in the manner you and the others do. Most of us are trained to be shinobi, which I guess are the equivalent to benders, and there are some who train to be samurai, warriors who can use the same energy we shinobi use, but to a lesser extent, while the rest are like the warriors and ordinary citizens who try to live life as best they can. Naruto explained to the blind bender. Toph paused and looked at him for a while before raising an eyebrow. You're not lying. I can tell when a person lies due to how irregular their heartbeat gets and when certain muscles tense up. I'm practically a living lie detector. She explained. That's an interesting ability to have, Naruto commented, getting a smile from Toph, who appeared to be growing out of her depression. Though I have to ask you this, Toph, what do you plan on doing after this war is over and peace comes? Go home to that prison you call a home? His question made her flinch and shook her head defiantly. No way, I'll never go back to that place. Never. I will not be a prisoner in that hellhole ever again. She declared with a fierce expression on her face. Well, it is not like you can stay with your friends forever, Toph. Naruto stated as he approached Toph, who looked a bit depressed knowing what he was saying was right. Once your journey ends, where do you plan to go from there? What do you plan on doing in the future? She tried to say something, but couldn't because she never thought that far ahead in what she wanted to do in her life. Nothing, because someday, you and your friends will walk your separate paths in life. Naruto replied back, knowing she had no answer as he knew a few people who went down this path before. You will be alone in this world with no one to guide you, and once peace is ensured and you all go your separate ways, you will no longer have any friends. As you grow older, your skills as an earthbender will leave your body, and you'll have no one to carry on your legacy due to the era of peace. Your title as the greatest earthbender will be nothing but memory to everyone until they eventually forget about you and your accomplishments. Toph said and hung her head while fresh tear took form and fell down her cheeks, clenching her fists at the heartbreaking truth Naruto was telling her, where she would once again be all alone in this world with no friends or family. Said blonde reaches out and gently brushes her tears away, surprising the blind bender at his action, wondering why he was trying to comfort her. Toph, I want to make you an offer. One that will be a great benefit for you, and even greater than the title you carry. When she heard this, Toph wipes her eyes with her sleeve and looks up at him with her light green eyes, giving off a strong but calm front. I'm listening. She said. I can give you a life where you can prove yourself to others that you are truly the best at what you do. If you would like to join me, I can show you different worlds out there, and the adventures will never seem to end. You can go to places that you can only dream of going, and as a bonus I can give you another gift in the process. He offered, getting a look of interest from her facial expression, mainly because Naruto has been telling her nothing but the truth and had no reason to lie to her. What is this so-called gift you're willing to give me? She questioned with interest and excitement in her voice, only to feel Naruto caress her cheek in a way that made her face flush from such a gentle touch, since no one has ever touched her in such an affectionate manner. My gift to you, Toph, is your eyesight. He answered. When the word eyesight left his lips, her eyes widened greatly. An offer like this was astounding to her, mainly because a long time ago, it was her dream to not only see the world, but the different colors, people, animals, and other things that existed around her, instead of feeling for it with her hands and feet. As she pondered on this, Toph realized something had to be up with what he was offering her and took a step back. Let's say I believe you in what you are saying and that you could actually give me my eyesight. I want to know what you want in return for such an offer. She questioned. Naruto simply chuckles and shakes his head. Honestly, Toph, I don't really want anything from you, except maybe the pleasure of your company, and even if you don't want to join me, I'll give you the ability to see the world around you. He answered. Toph raised a brow and tilted her head a little, which in Naruto's opinion, made her look cute. So you're willing to give me my eyesight with no strings attached whatsoever? I give you my word, Toph, I will give you the ability to see whether you join me or not. Naruto promised the blind bender. I'll let you think about this for a while, since I know it is rather shocking that a stranger would offer you something not even the Avatar could give you. He leans forward and gently kisses her on the forehead, again getting a pretty blush from her. No one knew it, but due to Toph's enhanced senses being higher than a normal person's, she possessed a very sensitive sense of touch, which heightened the experiences of contact she was given, especially from Naruto's affectionate gesture. Now the last thing I want you to do is hold your right arm out, I want to give you something else. Toph nods and holds her arm out, while Naruto pulled out a small bottle of ink and an ink push. He dips the tip into the ink bottle and proceeds to draw the Harem seal across her arm. Once it was completed, it glows white for a few seconds and crawls up her shoulder so that it wouldn't be recognized. Hey, what did you do to my arm? Toph asked due to the tingling feeling she got from Naruto drawing the seal on her. Naruto chuckled since Toph looked rather cute when she was confused. I placed a seal on you that will allow me to teleport to its location instantly, so if you ever get into any trouble or just want to talk, then just focus a little or speak my name, though I would suggest you get away from your friends when you do, and if they ask about it, just say it's a tattoo. Toph grinned a little at the mention of the tattoo. She thought about getting one once to spite her parents, but never went through with it. Naruto smiled as he sensed her mood and pulls out a pouch full of water, placing it in her hands. That'll keep you hydrated out in the desert. I'll be seeing you again soon, Toph, and don't forget about my offer. Remember the name Uzumaki Naruto, but you can call me Naruto for short. Jana. He vanished in a swirl of sand, leaving Toph to ponder on the offer he gave her sighs before popping the bottle open and takes a swig of water. Wow, that is good. Well, I better go find Twinkle Toes and his posse before they keel over in this desert. She taps her foot on the ground, releasing a series of vibrating ripples into the sand, concentrating on any opposite vibrations her seismic sense touched and smiles. There they are. But that she stomps her foot on the ground and brings her arms up, causing the sand to rise under her and thrusts her arms back, propelling herself forward while surfing on the soft substance, letting out a whoop of excitement. Time skip. 1 month later. Earth Kingdom Forest. It had been a month since Naruto and Team Azula's trip into the Shaiwang Desert. After they had returned to the Azula's entourage, they spent a while to relax after chasing the Avatar, Zuko, and Iroh. Right now Ty Lee was currently arguing with Azula about taking a longer break, with Mai standing to the sides, watching her acrobatic friend complain to their leader friend. Naruto, however, was resting on a tree branch with his hands behind his head, chuckling at the sight of Azula shooting blue fire out of her nostrils from Ty Lee's whining, because it reminded him of how dragons behaved when they got upset. Come on, Azula, we've been tracking the Avatar for the past month non-stop, and Mai and I are tired. Can't we just take a week off hunting him and relax? She begged at the irritated princess. For the 8th time, Ty Lee, no. We have to stay on his trail and also look for Zuzu and Uncle. She said, hearing Naruto snicker at the pet name she gave her brother. But Azula, I'm dirty, I haven't eaten anything decent for a while, and my braid is frizzling up. She showed her friend her braided ponytail that had a decent amount of curled hair sticking out and looked unruly. Azula's brow twitched dangerously and looked ready to zap Ty Lee with a lightning bolt until Mai approached them both. I don't see what's the big deal in taking a week off, Azula. I mean, Naruto can practically track the cue ball down anytime he wants, and it would be great to relax for a while. She said while inspecting Ty Lee's ruined braid. Not only that, but as the leader of the team you need to be in top shape, and doing a little downtime will put less stress on your mind and body. Azula frowned and was about to refute Mai's suggestion until Naruto appeared behind her. I agree. Azula jumped back in surprise, but then scowls and turns around when she realized it was just Naruto and glares at him. How many times do I have to tell you not to do that? Naruto gave her an innocent look and tilted his head to the side. What? He asked innocently, causing a vein to throb from her head, while her eye twitched in annoyance before huffing and folding her arms, which made Mai and Ty Lee giggle. I swear one of these days I'm gonna get you back for this. She swore while he chuckled. I love you too, Harem. Azula blushed slightly at the comment before Naruto gave his opinion on the situation. Now Harem, I think we all deserve a little break. Like Mai-chan said, I can find Arrowhead at any time I want, so let's take this time to relax a little. The Fire Princess began to think about it since she valued Naruto's opinion highly, knowing that he was skilled in tracking down targets and performing difficult objectives due to his vast field experience. Knowing that she was on the fence, Naruto decided to go in for the kill. He walks up behind her and placed his arms around her shoulders. Mai and Ty Lee knew what he was doing and hid their smiles as he rubbed her shoulders. Come on, Azula, Harem, you need to learn to relax and take some time off. Plus your shoulders and neck muscles are stiff. When's the last time you had a massage or relaxed in a hot spring? He asks. Azula remained quiet and thought about it. She had to admit, she too was tired from the traveling and tracking and would like a break, so she releases a sigh and reluctantly smiles. Alright Naruto, you win. We'll take a break for a few days. Naruto grinned toward the other girls, who smiled knowing that when Naruto got involved, Azula would rarely deny his requests. He placed a kiss on her cheek, causing her to blush and the others to become slightly peeved that they didn't get one. He lets go of her as he pointed towards something nearby. Great. I saw a large lake not far from here where we can relax for a couple of days. Ty Lee raised her hand and waved her arm toward Azula's royal entourage. Naruto. What about the rest of the entourage? We can't just leave them in the middle of the forest. She questioned while Naruto smirked. Leave that to me. Azula, I need you to tell them we're going to take a break for a few days and not to move until they receive further orders or are attacked by Earth Kingdom soldiers. Azula nodded and told the captain of the guard to inform the rest of the camp of their new orders. The relief in his voice was evident, as they could tell he and the rest of Azula's entourage were as tired as Team Azula was. After the orders were fully circulated around the camp, Naruto and the girls walked away about 50 meters from the camp before he pulled out a scroll that had a blueprint of the camp and some of the surrounding forest. Naruto had made the map using the info from his Kage Bunshins, who he usually sent ahead of them to scout out enemies in the Avatar. Naruto smirked at the girls' puzzled expressions. "You asked how we could protect Azula's entourage, Ty Lee? Well, I'm about to show you." Naruto's hands blurred as he performed over 30 hand seals in less than the same amount of seconds and claps his hands together. Kakamen Jutsu. Hachiman Hijim, Barrier Gate 5 Seals Technique. Castle Closing 8 Gates. The scroll glowed as the ground started to rumble. Suddenly, a few feet away a giant gate with a strange bird on top of it emerged from the ground. From their vantage point, they saw 4 more gates appear around the area. Then a massive green barrier formed a dome around the area within the gates, making the girls' eyes to widen in shock. "What in the name of an eye is that?" Azula was the first to ask as they gaze at the dome. Naruto however chuckles as he loved seeing the astonished looks on their faces whenever he did something that was not of this world. "This, ladies, is a barrier which I created that will protect the camp from any form of attack and is very durable and capable of burning anything it comes in contact with." He makes an example by picking up a withered up branch and tosses it at the dome's surface. When it makes contact, the object bursts into flames and is reduced to ashes, stunning the 3 girls. "You could say it's another version of bending I learned when I trained with my godfather for the years." Ty Lee was the first to snap out of her state and a wide grin forms on her face. "That is awesome. Can we try it out on my next?" she asked in a teasing tone. Mai pales and gives Ty Lee a death glare, slowly pulling one of her knives from her sleeve and brings it back. Just as she was about to chuck at the acrobat, she paused and looks at her hand to see the knife gone. She looks around for any sign of it and notices Naruto smiling and twirling her knife in his hand. "How did you?" she wondered because she didn't see him move from his spot. "Another one of my mysterious skills, and also Mai-chan, it's impolite to throw knives at your friends or attempting to fill at them just for teasing you, it isn't right," he chastised, wagging his finger in a playful manner. Mai looked miffed and folds her arms, turning her head away from him while Ty Lee giggles. "And Tai-chan, it's not polite to offer your friends as test subject over something so dangerous." He gave her a mocking glare that made her look bashful and pouted cutely. "I'm sorry," she apologized. Azula however was covering her mouth with her hand, giggling at seeing Naruto scold Mai and Ty Lee like they were academy students, but knew he was just teasing them, but then realized something. "As amusing as this is, Naruto, how do we get out things from the camp with this barrier in the way?" she questioned. Naruto. What are me and the girls supposed to wear when we're relaxing at the lake? Our spare clothes are at camp." Naruto paused and looked at the girls. Silence filled the area for a while until he rubbed the back of his head. "Oops. I forgot about that. Sorry." Naruto apologized before pulling out a bunch of sealed tags and handed each of them to Azula and her friends. "These tags will allow you to pass through the barrier unharmed, so don't lose them. I already gave some to the captain to give to the members of the camp and warn him of the dangers should anyone try to leave the camp boundaries without the tags." Azula smirked as placed her arms on her hips. "Looks like even the genius can make a simple mistake," she teased smugly. Naruto however glared playfully at her insult and decided to even the odds. "You do realize I can take those tags back and force you and the others to, you 3 would have to swim in your underwear, right?" An evil smile appeared on his face when their faces glowed red. "And being from a family of nobility, you wouldn't want to have to do that in front of me, now would you, princess?" Azula gave Naruto a glare that usually sent admirals and generals running away from her in fear of facing her wrath, but Naruto just crossed his arms and smirked triumphantly at her. Azula, seeing that her infamous death glare wasn't working, turned around and stormed off to get her spare clothes from the camp. "You may have won the battle, Naruto, but the war is far from over," she declared and swore to get him back if it was the last thing she did. He looked at Mai and Ty Lee and gave them a victory sign as he grinned. "She's going to kill you one of these days, you know that, right?" Mai questioned in an amused tone and a small smile on her lips while Naruto's grin grew. "No, she wouldn't do that to me. Azula loves me but doesn't like to show it in front of others." Mai rolled her eyes at him before heading after Azula with Ty Lee following behind her. "Fine, it's your funeral. When she starts shooting bolts of lightning at you, don't come crying to me." As Mai and Ty Lee left to get their things, Naruto's grin never faded until he felt a nudge in the back of his mind. "Those women of yours are interesting, young sage." Naruto's eyes widened when he heard the voice of the mightiest demon in shinobi history, the Jubi. "So you're finally awake. How does it feel to be whole once more?" he asked the great beast who yawned and shook the drowsiness out of its head. "It feels good. I haven't felt anything like this before. I'm finally free of hate that gave me life." Jubi answered while Naruto raised an eyebrow. Don't worry young sage, everything will be explained in due time, but for now I must rest. The beast then drifted back off to sleep, leaving Naruto to ponder what had just transpired. The lake. Mai, Ty Lee, and Azula were laying on red-colored towels with beach umbrellas shading their bodies from the sun. They are wearing the bathing suits they wore in the episode The Beach, but Azula kept her hair down. Azula and Mai were lying on their back with their hands behind their heads, while Ty Lee was lying on her stomach with her head resting on her arms. What the acrobat didn't notice was that a large orb of water was making its way towards her. Azula heard water sloshing and opened an eye. She saw Naruto, who was wearing a blue sleeveless shirt and shorts that had red spirals on them, was making a swaying motion with his hand, while the water orb got closer and closer until it hovered over Ty Lee's head. The Fire Princess smirks and nudges Mai's side. Said girl opened an eye and looked at Azula, who pointed to Ty Lee. Mai looked to see what Naruto was doing and giggles quietly. This should be interesting. She said as she sat up while Azula closed her eye and let out a sigh. Naruto was snickering and kept the water ball steady. Rise and shine Tai-chan. He said as he released his hold on the orb. Splash. It dropped and soaked Ty Lee's body, and it caused her to jump up and cry out in surprise. Ah. Cold. She cried as she rubbed her body with her arms frantically in order to get the freezing water off. Mai was snickering while a small grin appeared on Azula's face. The drenched acrobat looked around and saw Naruto laughing at her, and she puffed up in anger, marches up to him, and tried to give him her worst glare, but to Naruto it made her look cute. What did you do that for, Naruto? She demanded, only to squeak when he thumps her on the nose with his index finger. Just for the fun of it, Tai-chan. Why? He asks. The water was cold, you jerk. She replied. And your point? Your body seemed hot, so I decided to cool it off. He said, which caused Ty Lee to blush at what he was insinuating, but then an innocent smile appeared on her face. You know, Naruto-kun. Your body looks a little hot too. She said as she moved closer to him until her assets pressed against his chest, which made a chill go up his spine. Azula and Mai instantly sat up with wide eyes when they saw what Ty Lee was doing. So why don't I help you by cooling you off? She said with an evil grin on her face, and she used a foot to knock him off balance and pushes him backwards. Naruto stumbles back and then. Splash. He falls right into the lake. Azula and Mai laughed when they saw Ty Lee push Naruto into the lake and said blonde rises from the surface with his hair covering his eyes, but he brushes it back to get the water out and hops out of the lake with his body drenched. Okay, I deserved that for pulling that stunt on you. Naruto said and pulls his shirt off, revealing his tan, lean, and athletic body that didn't hinder his speed or his power. The three girls' eyes widened and a blush appeared on each of their faces when they saw his upper body. Naruto saw them staring and a grin appeared on his face. Like what you see, ladies? Naruto flexed his biceps, causing the blush on their faces to become darker. Azula and Mai turned their faces away from Naruto, while Ty Lee kept staring at him with a hungry look in her eyes. Whoa, so hot. Ty Lee muttered while Naruto chuckled. Hey Tai-chan, you're drooling. He said. The acrobat snapped out of her stupor and covered her mouth. Anyways, are you three enjoying your relaxing day? Naruto asks, and the three nodded. Good, cause I want to let you three know that I'm gonna be gone for the next couple of days. He said. What? Why, Naruto, I thought you were gonna relax with us. Azula asks with a look of disappointment on her face. If it's because I pushed you in the lake, then I'm sorry. Please don't leave. Ty Lee begged, pouting and making her brown eyes grow. Naruto cringed at the way she was looking at him but regained his composure and pats her on the shoulder. Relax, Tai-chan, I'm not gonna be gone that long. I'm just gonna check out some of the villages that are nearby. He said. Besides, you girls need this more than I do. He stated while they looked at him for a while. Azula sighs. Very well then, Naruto, but be back by the end of the week. Naruto nods and shuns away while the girls remain silent. Well then, let's enjoy the next couple of days, ladies. Azula said, lying on her back, as did Mai, while Ty Lee pouted and mumbled about missing the crazy blonde, making the two snicker and shake their heads in amusement. Oh, stop crying, Ty Lee, he'll be back by the end of the week. Mai informed the energetic girl. Yeah, but I won't get to see him shirtless when he gets back. I mean, did you not see the muscles that lined his body? It was like they were sculpted, especially those abs, and can you imagine what it would feel to be hugged by him? She said, cupping her hands together with hearts in her eyes. Mai couldn't help but flush at the thought of Naruto hugging her. But Naruto. Naruto was currently leaping through the tall trees in the forest silently. As he landed on another tree branch, he stopped and noticed that the sun was setting. He then turned his sights on a village not far from his location and headed straight for it. As he landed on the ground, he dusted off his black cloak and formed a hand sign, creating several wood clones. All of you scatter and gather any info on the Avatar's location and search for Zuko and Iroh. You have 1 week to gather any info on where their next destination is. Now go. The clones nodded before scattering in several different directions. After sending out his clones, Naruto made his way toward the village. He pulled his hood up to cover his face, passing the villagers who were used to people like him, wandering and considering the usual visitors. After wandering around the village for couple minutes he noticed there was a bar and grinned, knowing that they were a good source of information, as well as good places to have a little fun while digging for said information. Once inside, he looks around and saw all kinds of mercs, bounty hunters, thieves and criminals that were on the run. Well, doesn't this place look lively? He mutters to himself and takes a seat near the bar stand and snaps his fingers, getting the bartender's attention. "Whatcha on eat, buddy?" the bartender asks in a calm voice. "That depends. Do you serve anything light?" Naruto asks while the man raises an eyebrow. "The lightest thing we have is cactus juice mixed with mangoes, and we also serve green tea. Why? Can't handle anything heavy?" he asks with a smirk on his face while Naruto chuckles. "Oh no, I can handle my liquor, it's just that I'm trying to cut back," and also Naruto pulls a trench knife, like the ones Asuma uses, out and twirls it in between his fingers due to the fact that two thugs were sitting in between him with daggers hidden in their sleeves. "If I drink too much I get this odd sensation to kill the first person that looks at me wrong," he says as he turns the blade in a reversed position and stabs it onto the table, making the two thugs jump out of their seats and back away from him, while Naruto smirked. The bartender's eyes widen when he saw this and chuckles, mainly due to those punks causing trouble around his club and starting fights for no reason. "Wow. I think I just saw those two piss their pants when you pulled that blade out. You must be the real deal," he states as he hands the drink over to Naruto, who places 6 gold coins on the table, and the man whistles. "Yep, definitely the real deal," he says as he took the money and put it in his pocket and left while Naruto took a sip of the liquid. "Whoa. This isn't bad. Much better than that sake Jiraiya gave me," he muttered and continued to drink it until he heard a scream, leaped on the table, flipped backwards while a large muscular man was seen hitting the table hard and landed back on his feet with his drink still in his hand. "Well, that was rude," he said and turned his head in the direction where man came from. He saw 5 thugs surrounding a female that seemed to be in her late teens to early 20s. She was 5'6" with waist-length black hair that covered up her right eye and had a top knot that was kept up by a headband that was in the form of a skull. She wore a dark brown sleeveless bounty hunting dress that hugged her figure and wore matching tight pants and boots with it, and also wore a pair of fingerless gloves that stopped to her biceps, and on both shoulders she had red coiling snake tattoos. Her eyes were gray colored and she wore gray eyeshadow. The thugs were grinning darkly and cracked their knuckles while she remained calm. Naruto narrowed his eyes and was about to interfere until he saw the smirk on her face and gleam in her eye, so he decided to wait and see what will happen. The first lets out a battle cry and charges at her with his fist reared back while she just stood there inspecting her nails. As he threw the punch she nonchalantly dodged it and stepped to the left, making him stop and turn around growling. He charged again and tried to throw another punch, but she once again dodged it with the grace and skill of a warrior. The others tried to join in and try to strike her in her blind spots, but she would just evade them like they were nothing. Naruto was watching and couldn't help but be impressed. "Man, she's not even trying," he said as he saw her stop a man's fist with her palm and used it as a spring to flip over him and then used a leg sweep to knock him on his ass. She twisted her body when another thug tried to strike her from the side and she roundhouse kicked him in the back of the head and sent him crashing into a table. She ducks when another tries to clothesline her and she strikes him hard in the ribs, making him cry out in pain and collapse. The third thug growls but smirks when he pulls a battle axe out of his belt and rears it back. Naruto's eyes widen when he sees this and saw that she didn't see this and vanished. As soon as he was about to throw it at her back, his arm stopped, which surprised him, and he turns his head to see a black-clad hooded male with piercing blue eyes have an iron grip on his wrist. The other thugs stop their advance towards June, who blinks in confusion and turns her head to see what they were looking at, and her eyes widened when she saw Naruto stop the man who had an axe in his grip with just one hand. "Hey you punk, let go." The thug growled out and tried to throw Naruto off, but he suddenly winced in pain when the blonde slowly squeezed his wrist and the sound of bone popping can be heard. The man dropped the axe and found himself on one knee and trying to free his arm. "There are few things that can really set me off. Ganging up on a female is one of those things, but attempting to cleave her in half with her back turned really pisses me off." He then twisted the man's wrist violently, snapping the bone and making him cry out in agony until Naruto grabbed him by the head and slammed him into the wooden floor, knocking him out. The bar remains silent while Naruto stands back up and cracks his knuckles and turns his attention on the 4 thugs. He then smirks and does a hand gesture telling them to come here, which infuriated them because he was taunting them. "You're gonna pay for that," Thug 1 says as he pulls out a dagger, as did the others. "Really? I don't know if I should feel offended or just laugh at you losers." It's gonna take more than mere pocket knives to make me take you seriously. He said in a bored tone which pissed them off even more. The first one charged and swung the weapon at Naruto's chest, but Naruto sidesteps the attack, grabs him by the back of his collar and head, and slams him into the wall, knocking him out easily. The second one yelled and charged at Naruto, swinging his dagger around wildly while he evades the moves without even trying. After the fifth swing he knees the man in the chest, knocking the wind out of him, and then performs an uppercut under his chin and sends him sprawling onto the ground. Naruto performed a hand sign under his cloak's long sleeves. In a flash of speed and smoke, a massive yet wicked-looking broadsword shaped like giant butcher knife with a circle cut out of the top of the blade and the semicircle near the handle appeared in Naruto's left hand. The other one was about to charge, but he suddenly stopped in his tracks due to the fact that the tip of the blade was touching his throat and ready to decapitate Hai at any second. Everyone's eyes widened when they saw him summon the blade, but what surprised everyone in the bar was how he was able to wield a weapon of that size in only one hand. You're really starting to piss me off, so I suggest you trash beat it before I decide to test Kubikirabacho on your sorry asses. Naruto threatened as he slightly pressed the blade further against the thug's throat, and the lowlife gulped in fear as he felt some of his blood trickle down his neck and backed away. Naruto scoffs and shoulders the blade and approaches the table, pulling out a bag of coins. Sorry about the mess. He says to the bartender and heads out of the bar. The young sage had just turned a corner in an alley, but then stops. You know, if you're gonna follow me, at least make sure I can't hear your footsteps, Miss Bounty Hunter. Naruto says, smirking under his hood while June steps out of the shadows. That was an interesting display you pulled at the bar. She said as she leaned against the wall, keeping her gaze on him. Naruto turns around and smiles. Thanks, but those guys were easy pickings. It'll take more than a bunch of street thugs to make me fight for real. You on the other hand practically manhandled them. He said while she smirked. Thanks, and you are? The female bounty hunter asks. Naruto pulls his hood down and reveals his face. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, but just call me Naruto, and may I know the name of the beautiful yet deadly bounty hunter? Naruto asks. June smirks and brushed her hair back. The name's June. So are you a bounty hunter? She asks. I'm more of an assassin, but I'm skilled enough to be a bounty hunter. He answered, twirling a Hiraishin kunai around his index finger while she raised an eyebrow. So what's a pretty and tough as nails girl like you doing hanging around a rundown bar full of low-class thugs? He asks as he eyed her awesome figure. Trying to get info on any bounties that are currently up. Sadly, this town is bone dry on them, and the prices for most of them won't even be enough for me to feed my companion. She said and snapped her fingers. Naruto blinked for a while until a giant furry creature that seemed to be a combination of a giant anteater, a German shepherd, and a star-nosed mole leapt over the building and landed beside June, making the blonde's eyes widen. Whoa. What in the world is that? Naruto asks as he never seen a creature like this before. June gave him a questioning look and spoke up. This Naruto is my partner. She's a Shirshu named Nyla. My father gave her to me when I was a kid and she's been with me since. Isn't that right, my little snuffly waffly? She cooed, scratching Nyla behind the ear, who in return purred and nuzzles her master. Whoa, she's tough as nails, gentle and hot. Man, if Hiro Kyofu was here he'd be having a field day. Naruto thought while June pulled Nyla towards Naruto. Nyla, this is Naruto. She said while the Shirshu lowered her head to Naruto's level and sniffed him a couple of times. Afterward she nudges his hand, meaning she wanted to be rubbed, so Naruto rubs the side of her muzzle, making Nyla growl softly. Hey, I think she likes me. He said with a grin on his face while June remained silent. Nyla was never this forward to anyone else besides her. You must have a way with animals. Normally Nyla wouldn't act like this towards a stranger. She said. Naruto chuckles and pats Nyla on the head. Really? How would she normally react? Naruto asked. She'd strike you with her tongue, which has barbs on the tip, and paralyze you. She said with a grin on her face while he paled. Yikes. Well, it's a good thing I'm great with animals, huh, Nyla? Naruto said to the Shirshu, who snorts in agreement. That was when June climbed up on the saddle and looked down at the blonde. Well, as interesting as it is to see you and my partner get along, I have to get going, Naruto, though I hope we meet again. She said, getting a nod from him. Same here. Oh, and before I forget. He reaches into his pouch and pulls out a Hiraishin kunai. Here. He tosses the kunai at June, who catches it. She looks at it for a second and raises an eyebrow. What do I do with this? She asks. That, June, is a special kunai that allows me to appear in the location it is at, meaning that if you throw it, I will sense it and appear instantly. He said. You're kidding, right? She asks and he shakes his head. I kid you not. Go ahead and throw it at that rooftop. Naruto said, pointing to the house close to them. June shrugs and throws the tri-pronged kunai at the roof and is embedded into it. She turns her head only to see Naruto gone and her eyes widen. and once again turned her attention to the roof and her eyes bugged out when she saw Naruto standing on the roof waving at her. "How in the world did you do that?" she asked while he picked up the kunai, landed on the ground and approached her once again. "I'd tell you but it's a family secret," he said while she got out of her stupor. "Oh, in that case can I have it back?" she asks. Naruto tosses it back and she puts it into a pouch she carried. "Well, I have to get going, but if you ever want to talk or have me join you in another bar fight, feel free to throw the kunai down and I'll be there in a flash. Until then, Jonna, my beautiful bounty hunter," he said, doing a mock bow and vanishing in a swirl of leaves. June stares at the location he was at and chuckles. "I hope we meet again, Naruto. You seem like an interesting person to be around and you're cute to boot, don't you think so, Nyla?" she asks and Nyla growls in agreement. "Well, let's go," she said, and Nyla roared and leapt through the rooftops and into the forest. End chapter. So this part ends here. If you want to see next part of this series, like the video now and share the story with your friends.